evening. Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the February meeting of the Lynbrook Board of Education. If we could all rise, please, and Mr. Yeager will lead us in the salute to the flag. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, everyone is present. May I have a motion to accept the minutes of the January 13th, 2021 regular meeting? Mr. Paskoff, second. Mr. Pileski, in favor. Motion to accept the minutes of the January 27th, 2020 special meeting? Mrs. Dinino, second. Mr. Paskoff. Moving on to the Art Gallery. This month's Art Gallery show features its National Art Honor Society show entitled Sticking Together. If we could start that video, please.
Induction ceremony, the students come together to create a group art exhibit. This year's exhibit, Sticking Together, was chosen by the National Art Honor Society officers and provides the members with a theme to interpret and portray in their artwork. Each student learned about this year's theme at a meeting in early January and were asked to create an original piece of art to demonstrate their interpretation of the theme. Sticking Together was just one of the many ideas discussed by the NAHS officers. It presented many challenges to the members. In addition to determining the subject matter of their work, the members had to incorporate elements of collage on cardboard. Each member approached this challenge in their own unique way. The result is one of the most creative induction shows to date. Please take the time to enjoy this year's National Art Honor Society induction show, Sticking Together. To see more images from this year's induction ceremony, click on the Vern Seidemann Gallery link on the high school page.
You know, for years we've watched that, and I've always been impressed by what the art students did, but I never realized until I had a kid doing it just how much work goes into all those projects in the art program. Really amazing stuff. Moving on to welcoming new teachers. Could Mr. Brian Donaldson stand up, please? Physical education teacher, part-time at Waverly Park. Not sure, is Carolyn Nichols here? Teacher assistant, special education at Marion Street. Congratulations. And Patrick Polick, long-term substitute special education teacher at South Middle School. Congratulations. Oh. Sadly, when you get to welcome some, you get to lose others. And tonight, which really is bittersweet, we are losing 9 of our teachers and staff members this evening. And when I looked at it, it hit me all of a sudden that's literally hundreds of years of experience that's going out the door like that. And I've been lucky enough, as has other board members, to have several of those teachers educate our children. And I've always been appreciative of that. And while it is sad for us, congratulations on what comes next for you. Mrs. Marcus, if you could begin.
No.
It's got to go up. There you go.
Suzanne Amberge.
Whereas Mrs. Suzanne Amberge, a physical education and health teacher, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2021, after 33 years as a member of the Lynbrook school community. And whereas for the last 17 years, Mrs. Amberge has been an integral part of South Middle School, where she taught physical education and health and was respected by all. And whereas Mrs. Amberge has mentored several new teachers and shared with them her love, philosophy, and work ethic that has made her such a valuable asset to the Lynbrook community. And whereas she has also guided students, teachers on their pathway toward certification, helping them to hone in on their very own talents and shared with them insightful experiences. And whereas Mrs. Amberge supported children in the classroom and on the court as a coach of varsity girls volleyball, leading them to multiple championship playoff tournaments. And whereas in her own words, quote unquote, teaching is in my blood and I am not ready to fully imagine my life without it. Whereas we are thankful for her never-ending love of teaching, her great care of each of her students, and all the amazing years of service she has given to the Lynbrook School District. And whereas we wish her a happy and healthy retirement with her husband and 3 children, and her continuing her role as a coach within Lynbrook. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts the resignation of Suzanne Amberge for the purposes of retirement.
Mr. Yeager.
Amy Cohen. Whereas Mrs. Amy Cohen, elementary teacher in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2021, close of business, after 35 years of service to the principals, staff, students, and parents of West End and Marion Street Elementary Schools. And whereas Amy has been fortunate to have spent her entire teaching career in the Lynbrook schools, she entered her first classroom eager to teach our youngest kindergartners at West End, the school where she would remain for more than half of her career. Mrs. Cohen embraced opportunities to grow with her students as she went on to teach in grades 1, 3, and 5. Amy has spent the majority of her time learning with her students and sharing her love of picture books with her 5th graders. And whereas Mrs. Cohen's committee work at the building level and district level has been commendable, she is the first to volunteer her time, knowing that she can find a way to make a difference in the lives of our students. Through the years, Amy has been a member of the West End and Marion Street Compact Committees, Patches, Grade Level Chair and Building Committee. She has been an active participant at the district level, serving on the Character Education Committee, Diversity Committee, and was a founding member of the Lynbrook Teacher Center, where she served as treasurer. For the past 10 years, Amy Cohen gladly accepted the role as the Director of Adult Education. She advertised the offered programs to sound like a page from her own teaching philosophy. She believed that adult education, like her classroom, was a place to learn a new skill, make a new friend, and promote self-improvement. And whereas Mrs. Amy Cohen eagerly explores new learning opportunities for her students, Ms. Cohen was the first to research and initiate the Commerce Plaza trip. She promoted an opportunity for her students to apply life skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, effective communication, and teamwork while working in Commerce Plaza. And whereas Mrs. Cohen's enthusiasm for learning has led her to be the first to volunteer to pilot a new initiative or implement a new curriculum. Her search for new instructional strategies and interactive tools for her students inspired her to be an integral part in the implementation of the Grade 5 Laptop Initiative. Mrs. Cohen has spent numerous hours seeking training to support her instructional practices and gladly acted as a turnkey trainer for her colleagues. Mrs. Cohen has embraced the Second Step program and looks for ways to supplement the program. Mrs. Cohen spends numerous hours researching the perfect picture books to help her students develop empathy skills and grow into positive problem solvers. And whereas Amy is one of the most generous members of the staff, in times of tragedy, everyone can count on Amy to always do what is right, be the first to sign up to volunteer for a food distribution, make a purchase for a child, or dedicate her personal time to spread cheer to a family or community member. She is the first person to advocate for a child in need or support a colleague who needs extra TLC. Amy opens her heart and gives of herself to others. And whereas the Board of Education thanks Mrs. Amy Cohen for her commitment to Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement with her husband, Scott, her daughters, Ariel and Sydney, and her son-in-law, Mark. Mrs. Cohen will be sure to enjoy her retirement years, completing needlepoint art, playing mahjong, frequenting new restaurants, and embarking on new adventures with her family in the Florida sunshine. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mrs. Amy Cohen for the purposes of retirement.
You're not standing.
When the board members call your name, if you could please stand. Mrs. Didino? Mrs. Garfinkel?
I think, are you on?
Can't hear.
Try the switch. Switch.
Whereas Mrs. Garfinkel, fifth grade teacher at Waverly Park Elementary School, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2021, after 35 years of devoted service as a dedicated educator who has touched the lives of countless students. And whereas Mrs. Garfinkel earned a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education from the University of Maryland, she pursued her graduate studies at Queens College, New York, earning a master's degree in elementary education, math, and computers. Mrs. Garfinkel began her teaching career in the New York City Department of Education in Queens, New York, as a second-grade teacher. And whereas Mrs. Garfinkel was hired by the Lynbrook School District in 1988, when she joined the Waverly Park staff, she taught first grade for 9 years, third grade for 4 years, and fifth grade for the last 20 years. In each role daily, Mrs. Garfinkel brought joy, rigor, and formed relationships with each of her students to ensure their success. In her first grade class, reading was the heart of the classroom and creating that passion in the hearts of her young readers. In grade 3, the focus was on reading and writing around the world and bringing biographies life. In grade 5, she led students to become open-minded to all possible genres in reading and writing. Mrs. Garfinkel also introduced Waverly fifth graders to the Global Cardboard Challenge, where students use reading, writing, social studies, and mathematics to creatively problem solve. In Mrs. Garfinkel's class, students lived by these words: "We enter this room ready to celebrate ourselves as readers and lifelong learners." And whereas Mrs. Garfinkel has been just that, a lifelong learner and caring educator. She has devoted hours of her own time to learn and share her expertise with her colleagues. To highlight a few, Mrs. Garfinkel has attended workshops at Columbia University's Teachers College Reading Writing Project, New York City's Lincoln Center, the Long Island Writing Project through Nassau Community College. Mrs. Garfinkel has taught as an adjunct professor at Malloy College. She also attended the Literacy for All Conference in New Hampshire, and she attended and presented at LIAMCon, Nassau County Mathematics Association. And whereas Mrs. Garfinkel is a respected, valued, and integral member of the Waverly Park community. In addition to fulfilling all her professional responsibilities, Mrs. Garfinkel has supported all school-wide initiatives, PTA initiatives, attended after-school and evening events, introduced Waverly's Make-A-Wish Foundation talent show, and mentored student teachers and colleagues. She has served on various committees, PARP Committee, the Literacy Committee, and Compact Committee. She has also played an important role as one of Waverly's LTA building reps, has been consistently viewed as a consummate professional and trusted voice of reason in our school, and whereas the Board of Education thanks Mrs. Garfinkel for her dedication and commitment to her students and the Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy, healthy retirement with time to read, travel, and spend with her husband, Robert, her daughters, Jessica and Emily, and her granddaughter, Sophie. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts the resignation of Amy Garfinkel for purposes of retirement. And I just wanted to add that my children were fortunate enough to have you and will miss you. We're so happy to run into you the other day. It was the highlight of their week.
At the end of the retirements, we're going to ask all the retirees to come up for a picture. Moving on, Mr. Paskoff.
Karen Gordon. Whereas Mrs. Karen Gordon, health and physical education teacher in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2021, after more than 30 years of devoted service to the students of Lynbrook. And whereas Mrs. Gordon has been a teacher who has been respected for her professionalism, remarkable kindness, and counsel by students and staff throughout her teaching career. Mrs. Gordon began her career in Lynbrook as a school nurse, hired in February of 1991. Prior to coming to Lynbrook, Mrs. Gordon worked as a nurse in the neonatal intensive care unit in a Long Island hospital. You can imagine the kind of exceptional person that decides to dedicate their professional life to working in the intensive care unit for newborn babies. Karen Gordon is one of those exceptional people. After many years serving as a school nurse in Lynbrook, and after much deliberation with Jerry, her husband and best friend, Mrs. Gordon made the fortuitous decision to return to school and earn her teaching degree. And whereas Mrs. Gordon excelled in her teaching program and was hired to teach in Lynbrook in 2003 at Lynbrook North Middle School. Throughout her 30-year career in Lynbrook, Mrs. Gordon has had an immeasurably positive impact on thousands of students and families and countless colleagues. Her accomplishments are hard to put into words. She raised 3 wonderful children, Jerry, Timmy, and Katie, and is a proud and loving grandmother. Beyond taking care of her family and her students, she is known for taking care of her colleagues too, bringing in homemade chicken soup or minestrone to a friend and colleague that might be feeling a little under the weather. You will not find a kinder and more caring person than Mrs. Gordon. And whereas Mrs. Gordon created the annual health fair at Lynbrook North, where for the last nearly 20 years, 6th grade students have been able to learn about a variety of careers in the field of nursing and medicine. This program has grown into a meaningful partnership with Malloy College's nursing program. Nursing students in the program spend an afternoon with 6th graders at North each year, teaching them about many important personal health-related topics, as well as careers in nursing and the medical field. And whereas over her many years of service, Mrs. Gordon has served as moderator for the Community Service Club, helped chaperone dozens of trips to Frost Valley, served as a coach and role model for hundreds of female athletes, coaching basketball and badminton, teaching our students how to be competitive while reinforcing the importance of learning to win and lose with grace and dignity. Of course, the emphasis was slightly on the winning, as any good coach will admit. Mrs. Gordon has served as the North PTA teacher representative many times and has been recognized by the PTA as a Founders Day recipient. And whereas Mrs. Gordon is a glass half full, maybe actually glass 3/4 full type of person, no matter how challenging the situation might be, Mrs. Gordon is always able to find something to be optimistic about. Her energy, intellect, nurturing spirit, and kindness will be impossible to replace. And whereas the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Public Schools, your family at North Middle School, and your colleagues district-wide, thank you for your years of service and friendship. We hope that this next chapter in your life is just as rewarding as the last chapter, and we know you will continue to save starfish along the way. You will be missed. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts the resignation of Mrs. Karen Gordon for purposes of retirement. And on a personal note, Mrs. Gordon was nice enough to coach my daughter in basketball, so thank you.
Mrs. Henderson Leslie Dino.
Whereas Mrs. Carol Henderson, an art teacher at Waverly Park Elementary School and the Lynbrook Kindergarten Center, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2021, after 13 years as a caring educator who sought to bring joy to her students through art, and whereas Mrs. Henderson earned an associate's degree in fine arts at the Fashion Institute of Technology, she continued her undergraduate studies at Brooklyn College, earning a Bachelor of Arts in Art Education. She pursued her graduate studies at NYU and earned a master's degree in fine arts from Brooklyn College. And whereas Mrs. Henderson has sought to share her passion for art with her students, before becoming a teacher, she worked as a docent in art museums, where she learned how to explain artistic concepts and techniques to non-artists. She brought that experience to her classroom, exposing students to artists from diverse backgrounds, styles, and time periods. Each year, Mrs. Henderson worked with her colleagues at South Middle School to organize the art show. And whereas Mrs. Henderson was an asset to South Middle School for many years, she always went above and beyond for her students, and the bond that she formed with them was incredibly strong. Her split between Waverly and South was unique because she already had formed a relationship with half of the students at South. When Waverly students arrived at South as new sixth graders, it was comforting for them to see a friendly face. And whereas Mrs. Henderson joined the kindergarten center this year as an art teacher, she has fit in like a natural. Mrs. Henderson's passion for art has transformed our hallways, and the children enjoy their daily art lessons. As you walk past the kindergarten classrooms, you can hear Mrs. Henderson reading books to the children and connecting literature to art. The children have learned about Jim Dine and Aaron Draplin and their involvement in the pop art movement. So much enthusiasm is shared during Mrs. Henderson's art lessons. The children are always showing off their artwork and proud of their final product. And whereas Mrs. Henderson is an integral part of life at Waverly Park Elementary School, she was a well-respected Waverly Park parent, as both her children attended, and she was quite involved and supportive of the school. Mrs. Henderson's creativity, positivity, and artistic abilities are ingrained in the tapestry of the school walls and 9/11 garden at Waverly. And whereas Mrs. Henderson played a significant role in creating the artwork for the Memorial 9/11 garden. Her dedication and commitment to the Evening of Art show year after year is commendable. Mrs. Henderson also served as the art director for the Waverly Park Theater production for several years. Additionally, she was part of a team that secured an art grant from Crayola for the school, which helped support art and education and awarded supplies to the school. Whereas Mrs. Henderson was also instrumental in establishing an annual partnership between Waverly Park and the Nassau County Museum of Art. Through this partnership, students had the opportunity to visit the museum for various exhibits. Mrs. Henderson was the go-to person with regards to curriculum links at Waverly, always connecting academic topics, subjects with correlating art projects. Mrs. Henderson's work ethic is second to none. You could often find her at school late into the afternoon and even on the weekends. She will be greatly missed, but should know she will always remain a valued and honorary member of our Waverly staff. Whereas the Board of Education thanks Mrs. Henderson for all that she has given to the Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement and precious time with her husband Richard, daughter Leah, and son Corey. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts the resignation of Carol Henderson for the purposes of retirement.
I would just like to add that I've known Mrs. Henderson for a very long time, first as the parent of my 26-year-old son's friend, and then later on down the line as the art teacher for my youngest son, who's currently 18. So she's a great friend and an amazing art teacher, and you will be missed.
And I also wanted to add a personal note that when I was PTA president at Waverly Park many moons ago, we'd often need help creating things, and Mrs. Henderson was always the first to raise her hand and help out the PTA and the students. You will be missed.
Christine Kettleson, if you could stand up, please.
Mrs. Christine Kettleson, reading interventionist in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2021. After more than 26 years of service to the principal, staff, students, and parents of the Marion Street Elementary School, and whereas Mrs. Christine Kettleson has served as a reading interventionist in grades 1 through 8. After joining the staff at Marion in the fall of 1993, Christine quickly fell in love with the primary children, where she successfully implemented the reading recovery program for our first grade emerging readers. She wholeheartedly devoted years in training to ensure that our at-risk readers would be well provided for. In later years, Mrs. Kettleson would also become a Wilson Certified Reading Instructor. She has championed for the struggling learners and dedicated herself to ensure that each student left her care with great self-confidence and reading powers. And whereas Ms. Christine Kettleson has spent countless hours attending conferences and trainings with consultants and reading specialists to hone her skill set to the benefit of her students. Christine's thirst for knowledge and commitment to improve literacy instruction has led to Lynbrook's emerging readers down a successful path. She has also implemented reading assessments and helped open the door for our classroom teachers to implement the best guided reading practices. She shared her expanding knowledge of reading and writing with her colleagues, classroom teachers, and parents throughout the years. And whereas Ms. Christine Kelleson's love of reading reached far beyond the small group settings that she provided. She was an advisor for the Great Readers Club for all students in grades 1 through 5, while instilling the love of independent reading in her students. She organized numerous school-wide reading assemblies throughout the years, and student performances were regarded as the highlight of the school year. And whereas Ms. Christine Kettleson has been a cheerleader for our students and staff, working closely with her colleagues, she organized our Pink Day, where she raised awareness and donations for making strides against breast cancer. You could also find Christine distributing pins in support of the American Heart Association. Mrs. Kettleson has been a member of the Marion Street Compact Committee and an integral member of the Marion Street School's 1,000 Day Towards Literacy program. In both instances, Christine worked closely with parent members to ensure that our students had the best education at Marion Street and at home. And whereas the Board of Education thanks Ms. Christine Kettleson for her commitment to Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement with her husband, Marty, her daughter, Samantha, and her son, Stephen. Christine will be sure to enjoy her retirement years riding bikes and breathing the fresh air while hiking outdoors with her hiking companion, Bear. Now, therefore, it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Ms. Christine Kettleson for purposes of retirement.
Where'd she go? Dr. Cindy Lee, please stand up.
Whereas Dr. Cindy Lee, principal in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2021, after serving 5 years as principal of West End Elementary School. And whereas Dr. Lee built a culture of love, respect, and community at West End School that every superstar staff member and champion student were proud to be a part of. And whereas Dr. Lee has inspired the West End community with her infectious positive energy and enthusiasm, and when that wasn't enough, she offered up some of the best incentives. Over the years at West End, Dr. Lee subjected herself to slime, blue hair dye, and being taped to a wall, all in the name of promoting reading. And whereas, speaking of reading, Dr. Lee made countless read-aloud videos, especially during the pandemic, showing off her very fashionable pajamas. And whereas Dr. Lee was never afraid of the theatric in order to celebrate holidays and special occasions. Besides the Halloween costumes that she coordinated with Mr. Christie, she has gobbled through the halls as a turkey, encouraged all students to get aboard as the conductor from Polar Express, donned a cap and gown to celebrate graduation with her champions, and brought smiles to everyone's faces in her infamous daily role as the birthday fairy. And whereas, in addition to her parts as an actress, Dr. Lee has also showed off her abilities to sing and dance. Who can forget her collaboration with fellow superstars in the show-stopping performance of I Will Survive, or her epic waltz with Mr. Agello? And whereas Dr. Lee promoted her champions' social and emotional well-being and showcased their unique abilities as part of Talent Tuesdays on Flipgrid. And whereas Dr. Lee fostered an inclusive environment in which all are welcome through her work on the Diversity Committee and her school-wide efforts earning West End the coveted No Place for Hate distinction. And whereas Dr. Lee has always led by example and challenged her champions and superstars to do their very best each and every day. And whereas many champions and superstars shed a tear upon hearing the news that their dear friend and great leader, Dr. Lee, was soon to retire, whereas the lessons they learned, good times that they shared, and their love for Dr. Lee will remain forever in their hearts. And whereas the Lynbrook Board of Education thanks Dr. Lee for her commitment to Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement with her husband Shelby, her children Bobby and Camille, and new granddaughter Olivia. Dr. Lee will be sure to enjoy her retirement years, traveling, cooking her favorite vegan meals, and baking, and now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Dr. Cindy Lee for the purposes of retirement.
I would just like to add, speaking for myself and Dave Yeager, Dr. Cindy Lee was a Laurentian before she came to Lynbrook, and even though we never really worked directly with her being at the younger levels, her reputation there was sterling, and she was a great loss to Lawrence Public Schools and a great gain for the Lynbrook schools.
Okay. Mr. Joseph Pallotta, please stand up. Okay. Whereas Mr. Joseph Pallotta, Director of Fine and Performing Arts of the Lynbrook Public Schools, has announced his intention to retire after 18 years of service effective June 30th, 2021, and whereas for 9,460,800 minutes, I think that's a rent reference, Maestro Pallotta has graced the darkness of the Lynbrook High School Gymnasium and John Bransford Auditorium, quietly shepherding each note and every movement into being. And whereas Mr. Pallotta, through a careful eye for talent and flawless sense of timing, has impeccably molded the most talented ensemble of musicians and gifted artists that Nassau County has ever encountered into a cohesive team to guide the creativity of the students of the Lynbrook Public Schools. And whereas Mr. Pallotta's sense of adventure and desire to provide students with lasting memories of their time at Lynbrook has braved countless journeys to the warm sunshine of the Magic Kingdom, the cold snow of Rochester, New York, and into the hallowed halls of Carnegie Hall itself. And whereas Mr. Pallotta's vision for the type of facilities the talented students of this 8-time winner of the Best Communities for Music Education deserve, forged a blueprint for lasting enhancements to the performance spaces and art studios at South, North, and ultimately culminating in the brand new, soon-to-be completed Performing Arts Wing and renovated auditorium at Lynbrook High School. And whereas the Lynbrook school community cannot thank his wife, Marion, and his son, Joseph, enough for the countless dinners eaten alone and weekends spent waiting for Joe's arrival home. And whereas we know Temple of Oda will be a much lonelier place without his presence at the Family and Friends of Music dinner each year. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District accepts the resignation of Joseph Pallotta for the purposes of retirement effective June 30th, 2021, and with thanks, ask him to step from the darkness and into the light for a well-deserved standing ovation as we bid bravo, grazie, maestro. Two personal notes with that. Well, one is not a personal note. Actually, we're going to be honoring tonight 4 all Eastern music selection students. And that is an incredible feat. I've been on the board 15 years now, and I think if we've had 4 or 5 over those years, that's a lot. And the culmination of to have 4 in 1 year is a phenomenal achievement. And that goes to Mr. Pallotta's recruitment and organization and coaching of his staff, I think. The other personal thing that I have to say is I remember walking in a parade, in a homecoming parade with Mr. Pallotta, and it was in the fall, and the musical was going, and my son was the drummer, and I said to Mr. Pallotta, how come you made the rehearsals in the afternoon, because now you've ruined my son's cross-country career? He said, yeah, but I gave him a music career. And that's something that my son has always loved to do. He was lucky enough to perform a couple of summers ago in some summer theaters, and he relished the one performance he had with Mr. Pallotta that summer. So thank you very much, and good luck in your retirement.
Jacqueline Miller, please stand up. Whereas Mrs. Jacqueline Miller, third grade teacher at Waverly Park Elementary School, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2021, after 24 years of devoted service as a dedicated educator who has made a difference in the lives of all her students. Whereas Mrs. Miller earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree in speech pathology and audiology at C.W. Post Center of Long Island University. She pursued her graduate studies at Adelphi University, earning a master's degree in education of the deaf. And whereas Mrs. Miller began her career as a teaching assistant at Mill Neck Manor for the Deaf in 1980. She then moved on to work at the Lexington School for the Deaf as a kindergarten teacher in 1983. She began her family and raised her children, while at the same time working as a sign language interpreter for BOCES. Mrs. Miller joined the Lynbrook School District in Waverly Park in 1997. During her time at Waverly Park, Mrs. Miller has taught first, second, and then third grade. She made such a lasting impact on one of her second grade students in her class, she was asked to loop up and be his teacher for the third grade. Mrs. Miller has served as a grade level leader for the third grade for the last 18 years. And whereas Mrs. Miller's classroom is filled with unbridled enthusiasm and energy on a daily basis. Her instruction is multisensory, and she thrives in her role as a facilitator of student learning and engagement. She uses music to help her students remember concepts, and she's quite the songwriter herself. Mrs. Miller's zest for teaching was also present in her role as the Waverly Park School Theater Production Director for 10 years. She was instrumental in directing unforgettable performances each year for the Waverly Park community. And whereas Mrs. Miller has tremendous impact on the spirit of the Waverly Park School community. Her humorous anecdotes she shares with her students have been retold for years. She is always willing to spearhead building initiatives that include student and district spirit, donation causes, and most recently, she led the effort for our No Place for Hate pledge in our school community. Whereas Mrs. Miller is a revered, valued, integral member of the Waverly Park community. In addition to fulfilling all the responsibilities of her position, Mrs. Miller has supported all school-wide and PTA initiatives. She has served on the following committees: PARP, Health and Wellness, Compact, Diversity, Sunshine, and Interview committees. Mrs. Miller currently serves as the advisor for our Math Olympiads Club for 4th and 5th graders. Noticeably, Mrs. Miller was nominated for the Disney Teacher of the Year Award, as well as the Long Island Math Educator of the Year Award. And whereas Mrs. Miller knew that Rachel Belmont was too hyper to sit through her class, she did allow her to run around the building in between classes, knowing that would help. That's not officially in your resolution. Whereas the Board of Education thanks Mrs. Miller for her dedication and commitment to her students in the Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement with time to sing, dance, travel, and spend precious time with her husband Bert and her two daughters, Christina and Jessica, her granddaughter Mia, and her grandson Carter. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts the resignation of Jacqueline Miller for purposes of retirement. If those retirees can come to the, we want them in front of the stage, Dr. Bear? If all the retirees could come for a photo to the front of the stage, please.
I've been waiting for one of us to do that. I was gonna say, like $5 we should have taken bets on who was gonna do that first. I don't think we're going to be in the picture, are we?
Yeah, they should clean that up.
Oh my gosh, that was hard. I almost started blubbering during Cindy Lee.
And to our celebrated retirees, I'll nicely say, you don't have to go home, but you surely should get out of here. You guys can go and celebrate. Congratulations again. I recognize her, but I don't know if she's... Ellen, get that. Yeah, I don't know why. Oh, because they I know, but the guys could, the table. But we can still have the tables. Moving on, Dr. Burek, to presentations.
Sure. This evening, we also want to recognize students, and actually, Mr. Paskoff alluded to this a little earlier, and under the direction of Mr. Pilata and the talented music teachers at the high school, we do have 4 seniors from Lynbrook High School who were recently selected to perform in the National Association of Music Education All Eastern Honors Ensembles. This year it was a virtual rehearsal and master classes and workshops. It will be held in March, and we are here tonight to recognize Camilla Barry, who will play cello, Emily Bergen, who will play the string bass, John Kelheder, who will perform as a bass one in the mixed chorus, and Ricky Rizzo will perform as an alto in the treble chorus. So congratulations, kids, and have a lot of fun, and you'll represent us proudly.
Of course you can.
As I alluded to before, this is a fantastic achievement. And I want to emphasize, this is not all state. This is all Eastern Seaboard, and that's a phenomenal accomplishment.
Mr. Paskoff? Sure. Hopefully for one of our last times, correspondence to the board.
Right. We received, this month, we received 7 emails from parents regarding bringing students back full-time. We received an email from a parent regarding school closures. We received an email from a parent regarding a return to sports. We received an email from a parent regarding spectators at sporting events. We received an email from a parent regarding funding for COVID testing. And we received an email from the SEPTA president regarding a fundraiser. That's a Valentine's Day fundraiser with John's Crazy Socks. And I have to tell you, don't tell my wife and kids, please, but I got them all John's Crazy Socks for Valentine's Day. Great fundraiser and a great company, actually. And they even sent me a little candy with it. And don't tell my family about the candy, because I'm keeping that.
Well, I placed an order too, and I think you get it in like 2 days, so it's probably not, you probably can still have time to get it in time for Valentine's Day.
And also, I just read in the paper that he was giving back. Part of the company, what they do is give back, because he was in the hospital with COVID, so he was giving back to the hospital that treated him. So it's just a great company.
Pretty sure they're going to find out now, Rob. Reports from trustees, facilities committee.
All right, this is going to take a while. But I have to say that we did have a great meeting. It's myself and Mr. Paskoff and Mr. Nino, and it's run by Dr. Lynch and Jim Sadia, who are behind the scenes, but they are phenomenal. They are so on top of everything in what's going on with our facilities, especially with the construction that's going on here. It's really, actually remarkable, very commendable. They're really like, you don't see them much, but I mean, they are so on top of things, and it makes the meeting really actually go very smoothly. So we do have a couple of things to report and a couple of things to talk about. I'll do it one at a time, and I think then we could discuss
Yes,
it.
please.
All right. So this Aluka bond that's out in front, this the goldish new stuff that they put on the front, Mr. Sadia had asked the general contractor for a quote to redo, if you guys can picture it, all the green tin that's around the rest of the building. He got a quote to match the Aluka bond all around the building, so we have much more cohesive looking building. That would cost $139,000, $139,826.07. As a facilities committee, we had recommended it. Obviously, we have to discuss it as a board, and we would have to approve a change order. So I'm going to let Dr. Lynch just maybe explain to you what a change order is.
Sure, that's great, Mr. Yeager. So I do just want to do one thing to the control room. Kayla, this is how this is going to go. We're going to have this discussion, and then my presentation will be later. So you can bring down the presentation, and I'll give you a cue when that's ready. So a change order, when we award the contract, there are certain allowances built in for slight overruns, slight things, but when you're adding something that is significant and needs kind of outside the scope of the first contract, there needs to be a formal filing with the state of New York, and that has to be approved by the board when it's over a certain amount of funds. So so in order for something to do something at $140,000, you all would need to adopt a change order and authorize that.
So, I mean, in general, it was our feeling on the facilities committee that it would almost look silly. We're going to have this gorgeous new building with this beautiful Lucabon that's out in front, and then we're going to have this old tin that's green around the sides and around the back. So we just thought, you know, we've gone this far. It might be something to consider and look at least that was our feeling.
And if you look at the green on the back, it almost reminds me of the green that's like woven into a chain link fence. So what it really looks like, if you really study it, which I did after the fact of the facilities meeting, and you know, it really looks like it would really enhance the overall look of the building and make it look complete and cohesive.
Is this something we're voting on now, or something that will be going into the
No,
budget?
the change order would have to come up with you formally at another board meeting. This would just be the discussion as to whether you want to entertain that change order a month from now. So it's not on the agenda tonight. This is just discussion.
Okay.
And just to emphasize that the money is still there, it's in cost overrun, so it's not like we're asking for more money or going to another source for money. The money is there to do this project.
I think if we're going to the extent of putting on this addition, and that's not a lot in the scheme of construction, it seems like it'd be something that'd be worth doing, and, you know, keeping the green will make the building look dated.
Yeah, I believe administration is in support of this, yes. Sure.
Yeah, if that's what the committee recommends. Does anybody have any objection to that? There's your consensus.
All right, so along the same lines, we had discussed, along with Dr. Lynch and Mr. Sadia, the reestablishment of the Owl Adventure Project at the high school. You know, obviously that was taken down because of the construction. It does require a bit of work because of fencing and security, because it would be kind of pinned back a little bit further, so lighting and a little more security. It would be kind of the same thing. It would require a change order in the amount of, well, there's currently, and I'll let Dr. Lynch, you know.
Yeah,
maybe go
so
into
right
this a
now,
little bit.
that's kind of, we want to get your sense of whether we should get those quotes. So that would not necessarily come up to you in the March meeting, but if you authorize tonight, we'll authorize Mr. Sadia to get quotes and take a look at that, and then we can certainly discuss that, but just, you need to know that this is being discussed. In the original scope of the project, we weren't sure whether Owl Adventure was going to be dismantled because of the way the underground leaching field, the way the drainage was. So eventually it had to be removed. And, you know, just from a point, and I think Mr. Reynes would say this, I do think the high school does have use of it. I think it's kind of a useful thing. It's been part and parcel of what the high school phys ed program has used. So that would be something that, and I see him shaking his head in the back of the auditorium.
And if I remember correctly, when we were first discussing the bond, that was a big consideration, that was, you know, something that they really wanted to keep here. So putting it back, I think, would be important.
And what is the location? Where would it go?
So if you picture where there are abandoned tennis courts off, if you go down Union Avenue at the edge of the property. So we would revive that area, put a fence around it, put a security camera on it, and that's where that would be located.
My-
So when we get the quotes, there would be like a diagram showing
Yes,
the
yes.
plans?
My concerns with that was because it's such an isolated spot. It's really in a back corner, and I just envisioned kids sneaking in there on a Friday night or a Saturday night and
Don't give anyone any ideas.
and getting, you know, and injuring themselves. And that's why we had to talk about a fence and a higher fence and a security camera, because that could be a very dangerous situation.
What will the floor material be, Dr. Lynch?
I'm sorry.
What will be the surface underneath the course? Concrete will be,
Pour in place.
Yeah, I think it's worth getting some quotes.
is that what the facility committee recommend?
Yes.
Yep. Any objection? Okay, so let's proceed with that.
Okay, and then two of the more bigger things to discuss, I guess. The high school roofing project and the Marion Street elevator project are going to need more funding. So we're proposing $600,000 within the budget for these purposes, along with the sealing of the playground surface at the kindergarten center, which is roughly $25,000 that has begun to disintegrate. In addition, the one thing that we were really talking about, one of the big things that the Facilities Committee was talking about, was two major capital projects to be funded through capital reserve. And one of them is the renovation of the Waverly Park tennis and basketball courts, which estimated right now is a $675,000 expense, and the installation of a turf field and additional parking at North. And trying to get those through capital reserve. And in order to generate state aid on these projects, we'll need to marry each of them to an indoor project. So the indoor projects that we were talking about at North, the replacement of the flooring in room 208, and at Waverly, the replacement of the front doors. So we then have to ask the voters, and I'll let Dr. Lynch maybe go from there. We'll have to ask the voters, but those were two things that we thought were imperative.
So those would be the two propositions for cap reserve for this year's budget.
Yes, that would.
And that Waverly Park situation, which has just been a nightmare for decades, right? So we've just been doing patch job, patch up. This is actually going in there and cleaning it up.
This is the full, basketball courts, tennis courts, handball courts, that whole area.
That's probably
And
I think-
what was the estimated cost for the turf field at North?
Well, right now, it's an estimated $1.8 million.
I remember when we put the new grass field in there, and we probably should have done this back then.
That was kind of the thing that we were discussing. It's just, with the weather, with the usage, with the amount of kids who are playing, the amount of teams that we have coming, it's just, we just can't field our teams. We're constantly canceling practices, moving practices, changing practices, because the field just can't hold up. And we thought having another turf field, would be advantageous to the entire community, that everybody can get great use of. And expanding the parking over there a little bit, we thought would be a great thing. So.
And then, Mrs. Marcus, that new grass field is now 8 years old, which
Well, that's what
is
I'm
really
saying,
hard
and
to
I
believe.
remember
It's
soon-
really hard to believe.
Soon after it was put in, there were issues with it already. My son was playing soccer there at the time, so I remember that.
Dr. Lynch, I thought I remember that when we put in the grass field there, that we did some drainage work.
Correct, yes.
Would that be applicable to the turf at all?
We'd be adding to that drainage, so that existing drainage
Right.
remains, and then there'd be some extra drainage that would need to be done to further, enhance it.
But in effect, because we did the original drainage, it won't be quite as expensive.
That doesn't go to waste, correct?
As it would have been otherwise.
So just some thoughts on the facilities capital reserves. We currently have two capital reserve funds. One that is expiring, the building renovation fund, and that currently has $3.7 million in it. And then the voters approved a new capital reserve at the last vote, and that's the facilities improvement fund, and that's at $2 million. So we currently have $5.7 million in reserve. If you would go forward with these projects, and I think we're discussing whether discuss whether we should be discussing them at the budget hearing after the break. There would be $3.2 million left in capital reserve, and then an additional $1.5 million that we put aside when we established Marion Street. We knew that we had to replace that carpet someday, so we kind of had a little fund associated with that. So that's funded at $1.5 million. So those are some facts. Again, no decisions necessarily have to be reached tonight, but just to know that, should we be putting that on the agenda to be discussing at budget time is really the question.
And
When
if
you
it
say
goes
that-
up, as a proposition, prior to that, when you're going to work towards budget, budget is the same process as last time, figuring out what size field it would be, what sports it would be lined for. I guess we would try to replicate what we've done because the other field's been pretty successful and so forth.
Yeah, I think it would be looking at girls and boys lacrosse and soccer.
When you say that the capital reserve is expiring, does that mean that you can no longer fund it?
That's correct. That's why
Okay.
we had to establish the new one last.
But you don't have to use all the money?
No.
Okay.
So if it's girls and boys lacrosse, those fields are bigger than a football field, correct?
Yes, they'll be a little bit bigger.
Yeah, that's,
The soccer is.
Right, soccer's even bigger. So what would be the downside, Doctor, of just lining it that way, just in case for some reason we needed to use it that way?
yeah,
I mean, I guess the idea is now you just want a consensus of moving forward. Those are all details we could work with. Because I guess if it's just lined, there's no additional cost just to line it. They come with that anyway. So is the board in agreement, and is there a consensus to move forward and let the administration begin to formulate for the budget? All right.
I did have one question. Did the Facilities Committee discuss the interior courtyard at North? Has that, because I know when we did the walkthrough,
We did.
that was discussed. Has any
you know,
further
that was not
discussion
brought
taken place?
to the committee's attention. I apologize for that. We'll throw that onto the next, you know, that would be a great thing to discuss at the next meeting. I'll make sure.
Yeah,
I make a note of
because
that.
I think, I mean, in the context of the projects that you're talking about, that's probably one of the less expensive projects. And, you know, Mr. Fallon, in that discussion, he had a lot of enthusiasm and good ideas with respect to that space. So, yeah, hopefully
Yeah,
you can.
we will be meeting one time, you know, another time this year, so that will certainly bring that up for discussion.
Okay, super. Thank you.
And then last but not least, what probably most people are waiting for, and I'm going to turn this really over to Dr. Lynch, is the update on the construction.
So we're gonna have audio visual
Yeah,
on this
he's got
one.
a whole
So
bunch of
Kayla,
good
if
stuff
you
for
could-
us.
if
He's
you
worked
could-
hard on this, so I'll turn it over to you, to Dr. Lynch. Thank
Okay,
you
so
very much.
this is going to be our typical capital projects update, and I can't see from over here, so I'm going to have to stand up a little bit. So we're going to take you on a tour of the new Lynbrook High School as far as it is built so far. So if you could advance to the next slide, you'll see that things are progressing well. So this is the outside, so you can see the existing building in the distance there. There is the entire west wall that is completely built, so you'll see what's happened there is we have the block wall is complete, and then now the nice decorative brick is being put around it. So that's, you can all see that. That's when you drive down Union Avenue. But now, next slide, we can take a look at the inside. So here we are looking at the current building in the distance. So this is the first floor of the new addition heading toward the existing building. And then on the left-hand side, that will be, that is the new security vestibule. So you can see a door there. That is the door to the security guard where he'll be sitting. And then that's where the kids will be entering. And then this is the main hallway that gets you, it's the same view. Now we're coming towards the new addition. Yes, so I don't know if the members, we'll do socially distance here. Next slide, Kayla. All right, so this is some really, this is off to the right side. That is the first floor hallway of the new wing. So we've now entered that new hallway where we were just in. We've now turned right, and we're looking at the new rooms. And you'll see, I wish Mr. Pilato was still here for this. So one of the things that we really promised the community is that we have really nice facilities at North and South, and the poor kids in the band room in this building were in a converted locker room. That is the new band room. It is huge. Next slide. I love this. That's the grand staircase. So when you enter that new hallway, there is a beautiful semicircular staircase that takes you up to the second floor.
And when we looked at that grand staircase, when Dr. Lynch and I and Mr. Seda did a walkthrough, we immediately thought, how can we personalize this for Lynbrook? And since we mentioned earlier about the talented staff we have, Mr. Pilata actually approached the art staff to see if something could be created. So we're looking for an original art installation by our own students and teachers to put as an art installation in that grand staircase. So we're looking forward to that, and I know they're excited about developing some plans for us to show us, and the board will get to select what type of an art installation they'll have. And we're also, I just want to take a moment, we have saved stained glass from the original Lynbrook High School that was built in 1920. And we actually have two pieces of it, and one is destroyed, but we're looking to see if we can restore it, but one is in almost pristine condition, and we're looking to locate that original stained glass in a showcase in the new addition so that we can bring some of the old into our new addition. I think that would be special.
Okay, Kayla, that's the, so just some other points on this. So pretty much 90% of the first floor interior walls are constructed. 95% of the second floor is constructed. Already cut a hallway into the existing building. Both new staircases have been completed. The roofing material has been hoisted to the roof, and it's getting ready to be installed. Boiler and electrical room are constructed and watertight, and the windows are slated to begin arriving within the next 2 weeks. Again, it's our hope that the new addition will be ready for occupancy with the start of the new school year.
Are these photos on the website?
Oh, the website is a lot better than what I just showed
Okay.
you. So if you have not been to the website, you'll see some awesome drone shots. You'll see some really great details, but I think the facilities committee knew that not everyone goes to the website, so I thought it was appropriate at this time to give this big update of that major project.
So thank you, Dr. Lynch, and thanks to Jim also. You guys are doing a really awesome job.
While we're talking about the addition, we should mention PTA Council with the brick sales. I don't have the exact information, but I know if you go on their Facebook page, you can find the link to, purchasing a brick.
They're doing rather well. We had our PTA meeting today, and I think Mrs. O'Donoghue is here, right? Your goal is 600 some odd bricks, and you're over 400 sold, so they're well on their way. They've gotten great feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. I think you went 4 for 4 there. Good job. Audit Committee?
Yep. I'm on, right? Yes. Okay, so we had a meeting on January 26th, and it's myself, Mr. Pulaski, Ms. Hanson, Mr. Dankers in the committee, and Dr. Lynch. And the agenda was for us to review the annual internal audit report, which is conducted by the D'Angelo and Company. And there were 2 portions of the audit, the annual risk assessment and a review of purchasing and procurement. The bulk of the risk assessment centered on follow-up regarding information, technology, and data privacy concerns. The auditor complimented the district for staying on top of these issues, but also provided some recommendations for important next steps. They also noted the district implemented both recommendations from last year's audit of the federal programs, and the district received an overall good evaluation of its purchasing controls. However, there were 2 recommendations for further action regarding sole source vendors and the clarification of independent contractors. And the topic for the next internal audit will be a full evaluation of the information technology infrastructure, since major reorganization has taken place since the last time a deep analysis was conducted 10 years ago. And we had a really successful meeting. I think I asked about 1 million questions. But just the data privacy concerns really was of interest to me. I had mentioned at the meeting years back when the whole opt-out movement came, there was a big group that came about children's data and what was being sent out. So this was really interesting, and listening to really making sure that the information that is stored is safe for all of our children.
You want to continue with the legislative priorities?
I do. I also wanted to mention, which I'm just going to jump in here before that, that tomorrow is Human Relations Day, and I know we will be getting an invitation to go, and it's really, during a pandemic, doing great things for these students. I see the teachers going above and beyond on a daily basis and doing a great job. And the lineup for tomorrow's speakers is just really great. It looks like an amazing day, so I encourage people to ask their students about it, and hopefully they'll be, I think it's being recorded, so maybe everyone will be able to see part of the presentations for tomorrow. But I'd really like to commend even the children that sang and danced with under Barry Weiner was amazing. Just the invitation, the theme that they created for the year. It just really shows how much everyone's in this together, and it just really is nice to see. So also, now that you're probably sick of listening to me, our legislative priorities, and I lost my page. So I'm just going to, basically talking about some of the priorities is really reimbursement for school districts for COVID-19 measures, fully restoring the aid. And I know I was sitting on a meeting the other day talking, because I do it from, and when I go on my meetings, I talk from a board perspective and a teacher perspective of not losing things for our school districts. And this year, it looks like we might be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, made whole because of the COVID relief fund that's coming in from the state. But next year, we're starting at a lower amount because that COVID relief isn't there. So we could really look at a major problem the year after, which is problematic. So that's really a push that we need to. And, Cuomo seems to play this game every year. So who knows what will happen.
And we shared that information with PTA this morning, and in fact, right before this meeting, Dr. Lynch and I received an email about a PTA movement, and so they have pushed, PTA Council, I believe, has pushed it out on their Facebook page, and if you it's all set up with the information that's needed, and you can click on to send it to your senator, send it to your assembly person. So I encourage everyone to please follow PTA and join that support, because we need this happens every year, and everybody says, what is the board doing? What's administration doing? We lobby. We clearly make our voices heard, but they don't listen to us. They listen to their constituents, and that's you, the parents of the children who we educate. So the more parents that can have their voices heard, that goes much further than us.
I wanted to jump on that because I've always advocated, for getting involved legislatively and talking. And now that things are virtual, you can make an appointment with, people, and you could bring your children along so they can tell personal stories of things that they are going to miss out on if the funding is not here, and that would be so impactful. So I recommend, getting together, do a virtual call with the PTA, put your students on, and let them speak to them, because it's so, so important.
Mrs. Marcus?
While we're talking about legislative issues, I just wanted to mention that I was informed that Senator Todd Kaminsky is holding a virtual roundtable on cyberbullying tomorrow, February 11th at 5 p.m. There's going to be a forum convening an expert panel of educators, students, law enforcement officials, and other stakeholders to discuss and address the causes and manifestations of cyberbullying to students and provide recommendations to best address the issue. A 2020 study conducted by the Cyberbullying Research Center found that, sadly, 1 in 5 students between the ages of 9 through 12 had seen, perpetrated, or been a victim of cyberbullying. So if you have any interest regarding watching or being a part of this, the event will be live streamed on the Senator's website, which is kaminsky.newyorksenate.gov, as well as on his Senate Facebook page, facebook.com/Senator Kaminsky. And again, I think that, as sad as it is that, the pandemic is still going on, one of the upsides is there are so many things being live streamed now, things that you wouldn't have been able to attend before because it would have taken time out of your day or you wouldn't be able to leave work. They're easily accessible now, which is a good thing.
Thank you, Mrs. Marcus, for that.
I just, I don't know if I think I misspoke before just saying, and I don't know if I gave proper credit, the SGA for working, and I know they were in the building tonight, and under the leadership of Mrs. Kirby. I'm just thinking of what I had written down, and I don't think I got everything out that I wanted to say, so they really, did a great job putting that together.
I happened to see on Facebook the song, the Hamilton song, for, Human Relations Day, and it really was, very well done.
Yeah, and if you see the lineup, one of our former coaches, Larry Glens, is speaking. It's unbelievable the amount of people that are speaking to our students.
Thank you, Mrs. Dinino. Anything else from the board?
I attended the BOCES budget, the first BOCES budget workshop, which was done on Zoom. The second BOCES budget, we had a meeting of our own board that night, and I couldn't attend. But I do have the budget here in case anybody wants to look it over. Anybody on the board wants to look it over. I have that for both presentations. It's really, I don't know that we all appreciate what BOCES does for us, but we pay a chunk of change. It costs us a chunk of change. I don't have the exact dollar figure. That's why I called it a chunk of change. But it costs us a bunch of money, but they do everything from scheduling our sporting events to arranging for referees to purchasing agreements and helping us purchase different things like our computers and various things, to specialized programs that we send kids to for theater and carpentry and automotive mechanics and all things that we used to offer here in the school, but we can't really offer anymore. And teachers that we've used over the years too. So when we used to teach Japanese and Spanish and Chinese, we used teachers from those BOCES, and obviously it's a lot easier to do that than to hire a teacher ourselves for 0.3 or 0.2 or whatever it is. So BOCES really does a lot for us, and I think we take it for granted a lot of times what it does. So if anybody wants to take a look
well,
at
the key phrase there is, we pay a chunk of change.
Yeah, we
It's
pay
a
change.
$4.5 million contract.
You're being very kind, Mr. Pascal.
But I think it would cost us a bigger chunk of change had we not have.
Well, we're willing to pay that chunk because we get BOCES aid back for it, so.
Right. So if anybody, feel free.
No, on that topic, as long as you brought that up, and Dr. Verica, Dr. Lynch, where are we currently with the situation in the state, with what they're looking at as far as revenue and aid, and how the money from the federal government will be spreading down to us?
Oh, they mentioned that before. Go ahead.
So in our specific case, so we'll be detailing this a lot on February 24th. So we're, as Mrs. Danino indicated, we're made whole. At the budget presentation, you're going to see that we're slated for $11.8 million of state aid. That's a good thing. What has happened that is tricky is that there's a little line on the budget aid projection that says minus $2.4 million. That comes off one line, and then they restore it at the bottom at plus $2.4 million. What the state has done is it's taken out true state aid and replaced it with federal stimulus. So this is the first package, so I'm going to refer to it as the Trump package that happened in December. That money that really Congress was giving to schools for reopening costs is now being made to plug a gap in our budget. So that is a dangerous precedent to do. And I will be going into some detail on that, but I think that is a really great thing. And we do thank PTA, our partners at LTA, and our partners at SANUS, who all have really made their voices known that this is just simply not acceptable, that one of the foremost things that the state of New York needs to do is fund public education. And so I think that's a really good thing that people get it. You know, there was a line item at the bottom of a budget, but huge implications, especially next year.
And just to expand on that, basically it's a bait and switch type of thing that the governor projected. However, in numbers, the community needs to know then that deficit that we could be seeing, that we're starting off with next year, is over 2 million. Less than what we should be seeing normally. So if we're going into next year's budget preparation for the 22-23 year, if the state does not make us whole with their own money, we're starting our revenue 2 million shy. So next year is going to be a whole different set of conversations than what we had this year for our budget. So Dr. Lynch put together, and then the whole team, the whole administrative team put together a great budget that meets our tax levy this year. Next year, we're going to have different conversations if the state does not come around and do the right thing.
Thank you.
Billy,
And
one more thing. I think we have to also congratulate Mr. Martellotti on the, we met with him before he's our new AD, and just before the start of sports. And if people who don't know, there was almost no rules that were given. They basically said, you as a district, figure it out. It wasn't like a county rule. So, and with the administrative team and Mr. Martellotti, it seems like in the first 2 weeks they rolled out. They did a lot of work to get it going, to get our kids going, and our coaches have been flexible from what I hear and adapting and ready to change, and our kids have been great. And so just want to congratulate him. It's his first year, and he's seems to have done, a pretty good job under, some tight constraints. So hopefully it just keeps rolling and we're doing well.
hopefully we get that snow off the fields before our next season starts. Also, in the last item on the reports from trustees, we had our annual meeting with the joint PTA. It has an opportunity for the PTA council and its members to meet directly with the board, and had some candid conversations and express views and conversations about which way the direction which the district is going, and always found those to be useful meetings, and hopefully they found it beneficial also. Which leads into communication, which has been an issue we have been discussing continuously, and so we have to figure out to continue to make that an efficient part of our process. So one of the issues that came up was emails to the board. Currently, in which I think this part should stay, when you email the board, before you even email the board, there's a notice on the website informing you to think that maybe you have to identify the appropriate place for that email to go. But nonetheless, the board does get emails, and the current response lets them know it's been accepted, but several conversations we've had have talked about the importance of now having a personal response to each one of those emails. So how does the board feel about a process like that?
Well, I think that what people are getting, and look, this is a fluid process because there was a time that we didn't even have anything that would go, any indication that the email was received. So we're moving in the right direction, but what people get currently is more of an acknowledgement that their email was received and not really a response. So if there is a way that there can be responses that go, if people are going to take the time to send an email, there should be a tailored response, even if that response is, this is a question for or issue for your teacher or the principal, and refer them, to that person. But there should be, people shouldn't just get an acknowledgement and then not hear anything further.
Right, and as I understand it, the problem that we've always had is that we only meet once a month. So how do you go about making those tailored responses? People are sending us emails almost every day. We only get them once a week. So you send us an email on Monday, we don't get it on a Monday, we get it on that Friday. But then we can't really, it's hard to give a response because then we only meet the 7 of us once during the month. So how would we go? I think it's a great idea.
So what we'll have to do is,
more tailored response, but
right,
how do we
so
go about doing it?
they'll still, and of course, our clerk really handles the brunt of what's going on with this. So when the emails come in, and it will be her responsibility also to continue it out, but she's been very enthusiastic and has championed the cause to do this. So she comes back to me next month and yells at me because there's 100 emails. Remember, on the record, this was her idea to champion. So what we'll do is when emails come into us now, we all have to gather. The board cannot respond to an email unless we've met at a group. So we can come up with an understanding of what those emails are. Some of the responses may, if someone sends us an email 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago, and it happens to be a topic we discussed tonight, the response can say, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that issue was discussed last night. If you didn't see the board meeting, we can refer that to them." We can guide them to the appropriate places, because we do know that 80% of the emails, if not higher, are for different departments. So response could be, "Thank you for the email. This is more appropriate for your athletic department. It's more responsible for your principal." The problem is we can't give those responses until we've met as a board, but at least now, like for instance tomorrow, again, our clerk, who's championing this cause, if I haven't said that, we will let her give her guidance on what the responses should be, and each one of those emails will get a response from the board more specifically, which may be, as you said, Mrs. Marcus, it may be, it's just not appropriate topic of the board, but at least we'll add that personal response that we seem to think that people are looking for, and then maybe even guiding them to the appropriate place, maybe even cutting down on some of the phone calls that the administration gets so that they're going to get some direction from us on which departments they should go to.
But if they go, if it's something that's not meant for the board, can there be a response, you should speak to so-and-so?
Well, it should. We should be giving them, other than, because right now the complaint is we're simply saying to them, not for us. Now we're going to take the time and guide them and say, this is more appropriate for your student's teacher, it's more appropriate for your principal, it's more appropriate for the athletic director, for the music director, and so forth.
Right, but actually give them the email address or give them the
Sure.
building phone number. I'm just saying, no, just because
Yeah, no,
I
I
know
think that's a good
as
idea.
a parent that there's sometimes I can go onto the website and not be able to find something. So if there's going to be a response, it shouldn't have to be, then they have to hunt down the person to speak to. Sorry, Terry.
I would also like to say that, and me being new to the board, I have seen a good chunk of these emails are really not appropriate for board members to answer. They need to go through the chain of command, like we've been saying. And so just a generalized response to something like that would help. But the other thing I am getting used to is people hopefully will understand that the board does not have access to these emails until we get our hard copy of these emails on Friday from admin. And the reason that occurs is because we're not supposed to individually have opinions on these matters. Well, I take that back, that's not true. We are supposed to have opinions on these matters, but when we act upon these matters, they're done as a board, not individually. So you'll never get an individual response from a school board member. You'll get a response or a discussion from the entire school board, because that's how we act as a body. So when people think you send an email, we get it in real time. If you send an email on a Saturday afternoon, we're not going to see it till the following Friday, and it's going to be a hard copy. And then we're not going to discuss that email until we meet as a board, which may be 3 weeks later at a school board meeting. So people are looking for responses to emails, and they should get them when appropriate, but they also need to understand there has to be some patience involved with that because of, the nature in which we meet.
Maybe, I don't remember exactly what it says on the website or what the response says, but maybe there needs to be a little bit more of a clarification as to how frequently the board actually sees the emails, and that reiterating that there cannot be.
It says
a
it there.
board-
It does, yeah. It's very clear, and Terry and I have rewritten that like 3 times. It's very specific, it's very long, and it not only says it on the website, I believe, correct, it says it in your email response. So as soon as you email, you'll get something back that informs you that the board only acts when they meet at their meetings.
Can it, is there a way to set an automated response the board meets the next time at? So as soon as they send it, that response, I don't know if that's something you could set or not.
I don't know how they're going to be able to set an automatic response that comes up with different dates each time. But I mean, how far do we go? How much spoon feeding do you do?
Oh,
I
not
mean,
that.
there's
Okay.
it says it there. The information informs them of that. Now we're going forward and giving individual responses, and we're going so far as to get email addresses and do the whole thing for them. So.
Well, that was, I suggested
No,
that.
it's
but
no,
if we-
no, it's
If the majority of the
like
board
that.
doesn't agree
No,
with
we
that,
could do that.
then-
Listen, Terry's the one's going to do the work
Yeah,
on
I
that.
think
So
that's helpful.
the idea is, the issue has always been, we've done this for years, right? We've had people come up to us and say they didn't know things, and some people want us to show up at the houses and do it. So I think there's nothing wrong with giving an individual response and informing them of where to go. Is that going to be a lot of work to actually come up with the email addresses and? Right. I mean, they should, I guess, know. I guess if it's like the music department, they should know who their teacher's email address. I mean, they should have had that information their first day of school and so forth. So, well, we got to make a consensus on that. So, do we want the responses to be very specific to the email and phone number of who they should call? We want to identify the department for them.
I would imagine the email to provide is just as easy as it is any emails, to just type it out. That doesn't seem like a lot of work. I don't think you have to give a phone number, but.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so we get an email. The email clearly is best served by directing it to a specific staff member. So you have two choices. You can respond back to the person with the email of the person that they should then write, or you, as in Terry Moran, could say, with your permission, we can forward this.
I just think that, listen,
I kind of tend to say whatever, because I think that creates another step.
that's an exorbitant
for
amount of work for her
you.
to do. So we're looking at the potential of emails coming in, that now she really just forwards to us, that she prints out for us and forwards to us. And instead of just informing them that this is for the athletic department, we're now asking her to spend time to identify the email address of people, which is not readily available all the time, and the phone numbers. I think if we now ask her to take the time to forward that email, she'd have to CC the parent also.
Well,
I don't think that that she should have to be forwarding emails, but when you say that the email address is not readily accessible to us, then how is it readily accessible to
No, I'd say it's
the
not readily
public?
accessible to us. It's just, that's not, there's 1,000 things she's doing in their day. So every time an email comes in now, she's got to research. This is Mrs. Jones just emailed us. She doesn't know who Mrs. Jones's kid is. So now she's got to go through the directory. She's got to find out who Mrs. Jones's kid is, hoping the email indicates that little Johnny is Mrs. Jones's kid. She's got to figure
I
out.
don't think we need to go to that length. If you can't tell from the email about the staff member that this is related to, then direct it to the principal of that building and let the principal,
well,
Well, the email
deal
may
with
be, the email may be for the student's teacher. Someone may email and say, my third grader at Waverly Park is unhappy with something, and the response should be, you should talk to the kid's teacher. The email may not indicate who the kid is. We're now, based on what you're requesting, asking Terry to research who that woman's kid is. I think we should just say to
I
them,
don't think that I ever said that they should be researching who the kid is.
well, you want them to give the email address of the kid's
If the
teacher.
email, if it's clear from the email who it should be directed to, that's one thing, but it shouldn't require researching.
Well, that's a clarification.
Like,
So
who
the- so we're
because
asking
when
her.
you're dealing with a high school kid, she shouldn't have to go in and look at the kid's schedule. I'm just saying that,
Well, we have to clarify it.
All
The
right.
suggestion was that she should do research and find out who the kid's.
no, I never said she should do research.
Well, you said she has
I
to find
said
the
she should
kid's.
provide the email address. That's different than doing research.
But if she doesn't know who because this is why we get caught up later, and it's good that we have this conversation, let's clear it up. Because if she doesn't know, so now you're saying if it's easily readable, easily identifiable, she should forward that. I think just say, contact your kid's teacher or the principal. The parent should be able to figure out the kid's teacher or principal's email address.
All right, I mean, if she's saying my kid's having problems with science in 11th grade and you have no idea who the science teacher is, then it can say contact your student's
You know what, how about this? Let's compromise.
science teacher
Terry.
or the
Wait, I got it.
principal
Or
their guidance counselor.
I think I know where you're going. Terry, if you can easily figure out who that is, and you were so inclined, instead of saying contact your teacher, because she has a very good moral compass. So if she can do it, you'll do it. But if you find that it's not readily available, just direct them back to their teacher.
well, the other thing is that person might, Mrs. Jones or whoever you gave an example, might not feel comfortable talking to the teacher, so they come to us. Inappropriate. But we shouldn't then forward that email.
No, we're not forwarding.
No.
She's
So
just going to give.
we should give them the email
Yeah,
address.
she's going to tell them that we're not
Yeah,
forwarding.
okay, good.
That's what I'm saying. If there's any question, then wouldn't that fall under the purview of the principal at the building? I mean, if there's any
Yes,
question
Dr.
as to
Burek
who
always
should deal
trumps
with that.
chain of command.
Yeah,
You
that's
start
what
with
I
the
was gonna
teacher and
say.
you work your way
It's
up.
important that they follow the chain of commands and that we maintain that. So, yes, you might write a letter that your child is unhappy with their teacher, Mr. Belmont, and they might not want Mr. Belmont to see it. So you could say, please make sure you talk to your teacher about the situation. And clearly, it's that teacher, so you'd give the email right there, and
And
if
if you
not,
still have
then
if you still have issues, talk to the
please
building
speak to the
principal.
principal. Right. But if it's not clear, then I don't think anyone needs to research anything.
So we will have our responses set up, and we will defer to the clerk's discretion on how to direct us with that information. So that was one of our communications that we wanted to address. The other one was the correspondence to the board that Mr. Paskoff reads. That seems to be creating more confusion in the community. There's no obligation to do that, and I think the presentation of it has caused some confusion. We have to think about a better way of addressing that.
Right. I think that what people in the community and people who come to the board meeting hear is really, I'm just summarizing what emails we received as a board this past month. It's not, I think the community, whoops, I better be careful. I think the community is expecting us to discuss every one of those, and we're not going to do that during correspondence to the board. Some of them might not even be appropriate to be discussed in public.
And they may not, remember also, under the legal obligations, they're not requesting their emails to us be expressed to the community. So by talking about it, I think we cause confusion. So anything that comes to us is going to get a response. Topics of interest are being discussed like they are now, or like they're being discussed under new business. So nothing's being missed out on it, and everybody's going to hear about it. So I think the idea, I think we said we remove that part from our agenda and take away some of that confusion.
While I love to talk at the board meetings, I will find another avenue to do.
We'll find a new category for you. And the other part of that is we'll just have to have the policy committee meet on that's policy 2350 just to discuss that. If Dr. Barrett would note that, I appreciate it.
But it's not, but the people that, the emails that we are getting, whereas we normally say we got 7 emails about this, 2 emails about that, those individual people are going to be getting responses back to know that their message was heard.
Yes, anybody, and this goes into our next category. Anybody who emails the board is going to get a personalized response back. I don't like the word personalized. They're going to get an individual response back that gives them some direction on how that matter should be handled. And like we said, one response may be, thank you for your email. The board discussed that issue last night, and we can give them the link to the website and let them know they can find that information there.
Right, and often when we talk, we're thinking about things that were expressed to us in emails, so we could even just say, when we're speaking, as we read in emails that were sent to us, or,
And then the last part of communication, which I think I like what we're doing, we're streamlining things. I think it's going to be clearer for the community, better to understand it, is during there's been too much confusion with e-questions coming in during board meetings. The one thing that this board has always done very well is we never limit people during public comment. There's many school districts that don't let you speak if you're outside the community. They limit your topics. They limit your time. Someone was recently sending me some YouTube videos of what was going on in the Virginia School Board, if anybody saw that, where it was outrageous because people were limited to a minute, which didn't include time back. So people come to that microphone. We've been here for hours with as many questions as they have and as much information as they want. But I think there's been too much confusion and logistically in trying to get the ones during the meeting to come there. So I think we have to figure out a way, and maybe the best thing to do is treat those as correspondence to the board the same way. So if during a board meeting someone has an email to us, that information will be addressed, no less or no more than anything else. So if we're in a board meeting and someone's emailing the board, that will be treated as a correspondence to the board. And they'll get the same personalized response after the board's reviewed it, if in fact it wasn't addressed during the board meeting. What are the thoughts on that?
Then it would be something that would not be addressed as a board until the following board meeting.
Until the next
If
board.
something comes in tonight, if emails are coming in tonight, we're getting them on Friday. And then the next time we have a meeting where we have, we will all be looking at them together and determining the responses and how to deal with them.
Right, at a work
Okay.
session. And because the research on it says, one, there is no obligation to do that, and two, the reason they're expressing themselves as a board, because they have an inquiry or a question. We're not ignoring that. That information will be given back to them, or most likely it'll be something we're discussing at the board meeting anyway. But the information will be there. And then if someone has a question, or if it's something for some reason they need to be put out in public, or they want to have that interaction or that discourse, they or their representative can come to the microphone.
What if it's somebody who doesn't feel comfortable coming to a meeting because we're in a pandemic?
And then they'll email us their question. I mean, so let's take that point. So someone who can't come because of the pandemic, it shouldn't be about having a show or having to come up. If you have a question for the board will respond to your question. You're not going to be ignored. But if you, for some reason, need to be, there's no difference to the person that comes to the microphone and has an answer as it is to someone who sends us an email.
It's not really any different than before the pandemic. If someone couldn't make the meeting and they sent us an email today, we're still not going to get it till Friday and not answer it until the next board meeting. That
Correct.
kind of doesn't change.
I mean, it's true that a lot of people come to the mic and say what they want to say, and it's not something we are addressing at that moment
Right.
anyway, because sometimes it's not something that requires a response, or sometimes it's something that needs a little more research into it, but I just, everybody has different levels of how comfortable they feel, and, somebody,
But there's no greater privilege, or I'm not sure what the right characterization of the word is, to come to the microphone. If the issue is to convey something to the board, you're not losing that right. We're not cutting off people. We're not taking emails. And as Mrs. Janino pointed out, prior to COVID, it was the same situation. So just because we have COVID, and clearly it's not an issue about filling the house, so that we're not ignoring their information. So, and the other board members can weigh in on their thoughts.
I mean, I just don't know any other logistical way to handle that, like, I don't know.
Well, how are you currently doing these e-questions? You just,
Well, we're not. As our clerk had indicated, we had a couple in September, and in the last few meetings, we weren't getting any, but it was still just, it's important that we have a process that's uniform and consistent and foreseeable. So it just makes more sense, based upon what we're seeing and what we're hearing, to just, use the same methodology we used previously.
that's what I would think too. Yeah, I agree with that.
so do
Other
I.
thoughts?
Whatever policy we implement will work as long as we stick with it and be consistent with it. So e-questions don't tend to work very well because of technology issues and all that other stuff. So people have the option to come and speak here, and if they don't feel comfortable with that, they should understand that email is the best recourse.
Right.
And if we make a consistent email policy going forward, this should not be an issue.
Right. Which in essence is the same policy we had prior to
Right.
COVID. You go with it?
I wanted to wait until we were done with this. I have something that piggybacks on
So we
this,
go with
but I wanna wait
those
until
three
we're done.
modifications, so hopefully those three modifications, the policy committee, Dr. Burek, will help make things clearer, more consistent, more uniform, and more understandable for the community, and hopefully we'll see an uptick in the manner in which that communication is taking place. Again, Mrs. Hanson.
Okay, Dr. Lynch, during executive session, there was a brief discussion about an email filter that you had used in your maintenance with respect to security, and that it had inadvertently quarantined some emails. And, we had a situation where I, as a parent, sent an email to a staffer, didn't get a response, and it turned out that was the reason why. So could you elaborate on that a little bit, simply because I think that if other parents have sent emails to staff people and haven't got a response, it's not because someone's being unresponsive. It's because there was a minor glitch that has now been brought to our attention and we're fixing. So you want to discuss that for a second?
So our former system, which was done by Barracuda, the employee did not have access to their own quarantine list. Within the last, I think, 2 weeks or so, we've migrated into a new filter that now employees are notified of what is in quarantine, and they can take a look at what is in there.
Right. So, okay, so if a parent has sent an email and hasn't gotten a response, there's a chance that this happened, and they can either send it over again, or the staff person has been notified of these emails that sort of ended up in this quarantined group.
Dr. Lynch, I think if I could jump in for 1 second,
Yeah,
because I was involved with the IT department on this one. Unfortunately, Mrs. Hanson's email fell in a very, very small window, and it was just really unfortunate, just the timing, but there shouldn't be too many emails in this boat. If you have sent something to a staff member and didn't get a response, and you sent it about 2 weeks ago, just please resend it. But again, it was such a small window, and it was rectified almost
So it was
immediately.
during the switchover?
Yes, during the
Yeah,
switchover.
it was during the switchover.
Okay,
But
so,
what Mrs.
yeah,
Hanson,
that was
what Mrs.
basic.
Hanson is alluding to is
Yeah.
this new filtering that we're using through Microsoft rather than Barracuda, which was how we were using the old filter. So what happens every day, I wake up and I check my email, and I have a message from Microsoft telling me that they have quarantined several of my emails. And then I look at them and I can say release email or block the sender. And for some reason, every email I get from the New York State PTA Association is quarantined. Every morning I wake up and I have all of these messages from the PTA and it's quarantined. So it's got to learn that I want those released. So the system has to learn that so that they'll stop quarantining that. So what Dr. Belekas was talking about is there was a short window during that switchover, but we may continue to have some emails that we used to automatically receive, but they may be quarantined right now that we've switched over.
Okay. I just wanted to sort of, if there was a parent sitting out there going, I never got a response to my email, it might be because of this.
All right, so rectified that, on a roll. Going on to new business, we have to hold a public hearing on our safety plan. And to do this, we have to have a motion. So I'd like to have a motion to close the regular meeting and convene a public hearing on the safety plan. Have a motion, please, Mrs. Marcus. Second, Mrs. Hanson. All in favor? And Dr. Lynch, if you can present that plan.
Kayla, if you wouldn't mind queuing up the next slideshow. So technically what has just happened here is we've gotten to a little bubble legislatively. This is a requirement of law that the district must update its safety plan in light of COVID-19. So if we could just advance to the next slide. So we have a district health and safety plan. We have had one for years. We basically put it together every year. We have a committee that meets. They approve the plan. They send it to the board. We put it on the website for a 30-day review period, and the board adopts the safety plan. That's what a normal year is. What's in that health and safety plan? It is basically the incident command structure. So the district, there's kind of two components to the district safety plan. There are the building safety plans, which are confidential and no one can ever know. I always say we don't want bad guys knowing what our precautions are. However, there is a district-wide safety plan, and that will give you, and it is a great document if you want to, everyone should be reading it, to show just how we approach security. So it says that, for example, when there's an emergency in the high school, Mr. Reynes is the incident commander. If Mr. Reynes is not in the building, Mr. Brescia is the commander. If Mr. Brescia is not in the building, Mr. Sorosi is the commander. And there's an actual chain of command of how the district responds to that emergency. And if law enforcement shows up, that's the person that's in charge. So at the district level, Dr. Burak, by law, is the head person of all security. She delegates that responsibility to me to organize these activities. So that's the incident command level. And then it tells us, and then we decide how we're going to communicate with each other. So we have a district radio system. And once a year, twice a year, we have a drill. And unfortunately, sometimes it isn't a drill. And sometimes the radio goes off and it says, all incident commanders report to Channel 1. And all incident commanders, whether they be a principal, I see Mr. Agello out there. When Dr. Lee was not in the building one day, Mr. Agello, as teacher in charge, takes the radio. Some of these are really fascinating things. So I remember the one 2 years ago. If you remember, there was a problem with water and toilets weren't flushing in Lynbrook. That's a major issue. We had to get every principal on the horn to say, listen, we may need to send kids home because we can't flush toilets. It can be something like that, or it could be there is somebody who's got an armed robbery at Dairy Barn and the person's escaping on a skateboard, which is also true.
Can I just chime in there for a second, since you mentioned that as an example? If anyone lives in Lynbrook and you receive the robocall from the mayor regarding a water main repair on Scranton Avenue that's going to take place tomorrow, it was actually the same location. I have a funny feeling it's the repair of that.
That one.
So I asked Mr. Seda to follow up with the water company because we may have low water pressure tomorrow in our district.
That affected us in Raffles Center, too. when that happened.
So it really is the guidebook that says when things go awry, we are prepared and know how we do that. It's a plan, but we do have that outline, and that's what's there. The other thing that happens is that we're evaluating the training that the buildings have, the drills that the buildings have. Although much of the meeting is confidential, it's great for principals to have ideas back and forth as how to conduct drills, how to do various safety protocols. It anticipates the hazards, and it creates our response and recovery protocols. So what do we do if there's a bomb threat? What do we do if there's a lockdown? What do we do if a kid is kidnapped? It's all in that safety plan so that we have a reference manual to go to. And then finally, it always did, and it was kind of an appendix. Oh, and there's a pandemic plan. Little did we know that that would become the most important part of the safety plan. And that's what we're all about tonight. So if you could advance to the next slide. There are 32 members of the district-wide safety committee. There used to, when I began the job 8 years ago, there were about 12, and we've been adding more and more because more and more people are legitimate stakeholders into the district safety. So who's on the committee? The Board of Education has a rep. The superintendent and her entire cabinet is on it. All the school principals are on it. The directors of facilities, health, guidance, and technology. A new addition, but we thought this was a really good one. Every bargaining unit, they have their shop steward or their president sits on this committee. We have great law enforcement. So Lynbrook Police is there, 4th Precinct is there, and Nassau County Homeland Security is there. We have a PTA rep. We have a student rep. We have a consultant from BOCES who sits on the committee who's been an invaluable resource through this entire pandemic. And finally, a representative of our insurance carrier, which we've actually had very specific questions for when we were developing the plan. We can advance to the next slide. So why are we here tonight? If we just did this, we literally had the same report back in June. We're here tonight because the governor signed a piece of legislation that said the one you adopted last spring isn't good enough. You have to update it with these brand new requirements, and you have to hold a public hearing, which is why you're listening to me speak right now. What were the updated plan requirements? We had to designate essential employees and contractors. That means, should we have another government shutdown, people know who's to come to the building and who isn't to come to the building. What we've designated, and again, it is on the website right now if you want to read it, by title, the people that are expected to report to the building. Basically, it is anyone who can't do their work remotely. So, custodial unit will be required to report. The clerical unit is required to report. The administrators unit is required to report. Those are the various titles that we have in there. But similarly, while these people are being required to report, we had to make sure that we spoke to the collective bargaining units so they knew why they were where they are in this list. It established telecommuting protocols and overcrowding and staggered work schedules. Why is this important? So, the clerical unit, for example, is required to come to work when there's a government shutdown. If we have a pandemic where, let's say, the next pandemic, you can't be within 2 feet of each other, you may have to have a staggered work shift where only one secretary is in one day, one secretary is in the other day. We have to detail that stuff in the plan. It details a plan for the securing and the procurement of personal protective equipment, which there's a state guideline on that, and that is something that Mr. Seda has been put in charge of. It documents what the contact tracing protocol is, and it requires collaboration with local entities to identify emergency housing should that ever become necessary. So those are the new components to the plans that were not in the plan that this board adopted in August. It is in draft form today. There is a legal requirement that it be put on the website for a 30-day review by the public. That started yesterday, so anyone could have looked at it yesterday. You may through any of the next 30 days, and what will happen is on March 10th, the next time this board meets, they will be adopting that plan. But in the meantime, if anyone has any comments or suggestions, my email address is readily available on the district website to show those, to send those comments. The next slide, Kayla, is the compliance timeline. So you'll see that the board appointed that school safety team back in August. There was an initial 30-day period back in July through August for that first plan. The board adopted it in August, and we fulfilled all our legal obligations to give that plan to law enforcement and the state of New York in November. When the governor re-signed new legislation, we had to go through that process again. So the District Health and Safety Committee met on December 18th and reviewed the plan. The 30-day public comment period has begun, as you can see there, and it's been posted on the website with anticipation that the board will adopt it a month from today. If you take a look at the next slide. So that's where you can find it and go right now. Those of you watching at home, you can go right to the district website. You can go to district, you can go to health and safety, and you'll see that there is something there that says district-wide safety plan draft with an email link to me should you have any comments. Any questions from members of the board? Okay, that concludes the public hearing portion of the board meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. Always very sensitive to these issues in our community. We've always pretty extensive in what we've done in the relationships we've had with law enforcement and government agencies to make sure our buildings and our students and our staff are secure. At this time, if anybody has a question on this specific issue, they can approach the board by the microphone at this time. There'll be time later on to discuss the general meeting questions. At this time, I'd like to take a motion to close the hearing and reconvene the regular meeting. Mr. Yeager, second Mr. Pileski, all in favor? Dr. Burek, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Belmont, and thank you, Dr. Lynch. That was a nice job with the hearing. It is time for the monthly update on where we are with handling the COVID situation this year. At this point, if you're following along the dashboard, I can tell you that we have reported a total of 135 student cases this year and 32 staff cases that were positive cases of COVID. We've made changes since September to bring more students back to the classroom while still maintaining a safe environment for all. In some of my communication, you may have seen that staffing issues have contributed to a potential closure as a result of not having enough staff in the buildings to cover classes. And I think, once again, there's some confusion as to why staff may be out. So I've asked Dr. Berman to please speak to that to explain the personnel side of it, of all of the reasons why a staff member may be entitled to work remotely and then not be physically present in the building. Dr. Berman?
Thank you, Dr. Burek. Monitoring staff attendance has intensified in order to collect pertinent information concerning COVID-19 absences. There are numerous situations when a staff member may be unable to work on-site due to COVID-19 or COVID-19 related reasons. The staff member may need to be absent because the staff member may be subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation related to COVID. Maybe the staff member has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine because of COVID. The staff member may be experiencing COVID symptoms and is seeking a medical diagnosis. Maybe the staff member is awaiting COVID-19 testing results. Or the staff member could be living in a household where a member of the household is exhibiting symptoms and then awaiting COVID testing results. There's also situations where a staff member may be caring for a child whose school or place of childcare is closed. The childcare provider is unavailable for reasons that are related to COVID. Staff members are in communication with their building administrators concerning COVID-19 absences. The absences are then referred to me for review. Every day, I'm answering questions, providing guidance, and requesting proof for each absence. Each staff member must provide written notification for their absence, which can include a copy of their testing results, notification from the Department of Health identifying the quarantine or isolation period, notification from a child's school or childcare identifying the closure period due to COVID-19, or communication from healthcare providers indicating COVID-19 information. Quarantine and isolation periods are guided by the CDC, Department of Health, and district protocols. But in addition to these protocols, I'm in communication with the state and local Department of Health, our legal team, and district doctor to clarify any additional questions concerning the COVID-19 absences. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Berman. So you can see there are a variety of reasons, and just so everyone knows, on a good week, we have about 35 staff members out. That's a great week, actually, to have only 35 staff members out. So when it starts to tick up, that's when we approach a breaking point of do we have enough staff to cover classes in the building for all of those remote staff members. So I just wanted everybody just to be aware with some of that juggling that we deal with. Now, at this point, our subcommittees on the Phase 4 Task Force have held a number of meetings to discuss work toward more changes this school year to bring more students back. And I have to say, they have been very diligent in meeting regularly and coming to some kind of consensus. And granted, not everyone is happy. But there is consensus that has been reached at 3 different levels. I had mentioned we had broken up into an elementary level, a middle school level, and a high school level. I'm going to once again ask Dr. Berman. I asked her to chair the elementary level, so I'm going to ask her to report on the recommendations of that subcommittee.
So the Elementary Task Force Committee held its 3rd meeting last Thursday. Our conversations focused on how to offer the students in the green model the opportunity to return back to on-site, and the types of on-site learning or social type activities that the children would be involved in, how to gather information from the families concerning a commitment to send their children to school, the availability of space in the buildings, and when we could move in this direction. The committee offers the following recommendations. Prepare and send a commitment survey to the elementary families using the green model to identify which children will return to on-site instruction, the gold model. The survey will be sent out on March 5th. The target date for children to return to on-site learning would be April 12th. Classroom design should remain with the current model. Distance between desks should not be altered at this time. Protocols for masks and barriers should remain in place. A second option available to families will be to allow their children to participate in social events that will be offered at each of the buildings, such as orientation programs or activities designed by class or grade level. These activities would be offered in late May or June. Thank you.
Thank you. So what the committee is really saying is we're giving those green families another opportunity to make a change into gold, which is what we provided in December. We were prepared in December for more people to return back to school, and hence we ordered those desks and we prepared those rooms for that. And then at the end of the day, people actually changed their minds and stayed remote. We anticipate that hopefully now, with things slowing down and with the nice weather approaching, that maybe they would make the change again and come in and stay gold at that point. So we're anticipating that to happen. It may or may not. That's why we're going to send out another survey on March 5th. Yes.
Are we asking questions section by section, or are we going to wait?
You may. You may.
Dr. Berman, I have a question. Was there, I'm sure it wasn't arbitrary in nature, the March 5th and the April 12th? Are those end of marking quarters? Are those, what were those dates? Where did they come from?
What you're going to see and hear over the next couple of minutes between each of the three meetings that were held between the subcommittees, we tried to show some consistency across the board. So there is some, you'll see those dates of March 3rd and April 12th are consistent with some other things that happen at the other levels.
Did that answer your question, Mrs. Hanson? Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And I assume, just on that one point that you would mention, no, I apologize. You're asking for them to give you a determinate date what they want to switch, and after that, they're not going to be able to switch, or you're going to look to accommodate if things change as the months. I guess we have to reevaluate as time goes on.
We're nearing the end of the year. So
Right.
if the April 12th is the return date,
Right.
we're nearing the end of the year.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Dr. Belekas chaired the middle school committee.
Thank you, Dr. Burak. So the middle school committee also met earlier this week and decided on the following recommendations. Similar to the elementary school, we would be looking at a target return date for all students to return on a daily basis on April 12th. So that would mean the end of the hybrid. So that students in the hybrid program or students who are fully remote now would have that opportunity to come in every single day. The commitment survey, again, would be sent out on March 5th. Some of the differences, I guess, have to do with the physical spacing. We know that right now in the elementary schools, they have all of the students that wanted to come back, that came back, in that December choice. In the middle schools, we would have to start shifting the desks a little bit. So in order to make this work, we would reduce the distances between the desks and the classrooms to allow all the students who wish to attend in that room for the day to happen. So what that would mean is we're not going to really set a specific distance in the room. It would be more try to keep the desks as far apart as you can based on how many kids you need in that largest class that happens to be in that room that day. So really what that would mean is that the side-to-side distances in most classrooms that have desks like the ones that we're sitting at right now, the side-to-side distance wouldn't change. The front-to-back distance would be what would be reduced. The only kind of rooms where you see like the side-to-side distance change would be things like a science lab where you're sitting at a fixed table, because obviously you can't change distances between the two tables that are cemented to the floor. So it would be, the distances would be a little bit tighter on the sides, but for most rooms it would just mean to talk about changing the front to back distances. The important pieces though would be that the barriers would remain and the students and the staff members would also be masked. So in order to make it work, it would be more of a distance change, mostly in that front to back direction. Also too, we would be adhering to the recommendations we've been hearing about air circulation. One of the reasons why we were talking about April is that hopefully the weather will be a little bit better then, so we can keep those windows open and getting those air exchanges, which are very important. So we do feel that with the combination of the masks, the barriers, and the air exchanges, it would be a much safer environment at that point. I don't know if you want to ask your question. I saw your
I'll
hand
wait till
clicked. You
you're
wait
done,
until you're done?
sorry.
Okay, thank you. So also too, the other piece that we did have concerns about was lunch. Lunch is very tricky because we did want to maintain that 6-foot distance at lunch. So in order to do that, we would be using the gyms, the general purpose rooms, or the GP rooms as they're commonly called. And I think at South, it may not be as necessary at North, the band room as well. So what would most likely happen during a lunch period, and we've done this in the past for different reasons, is that we would platoon the two groups so that one group would be at lunch recess while the other one eats, and then flip it over. And at North Middle School, one of the things that may be a little bit trickier is that we may need to move the kids, like you eat in the gym, and you are hanging out, we'll say, or at recess in the GP room on what I'll call the bad weather days. So that group would then have to flip rooms with the other group, which is an added wrinkle. At South, we don't have that issue. Why we have to platoon actually is so that we don't cause a lot of foot traffic in the kitchen area, because we don't want kids any closer than they have to be. So that they both have different logistical reasons for doing it, but it does make sense in both buildings. The other piece that is very important, I know that Mr. Yeager had mentioned about all of the sports returning. We are also trying to start returning some of our clubs and give children other social opportunities, because we do know that this COVID time has been very isolating for them. So we are actually currently working on that as we speak even. Every day we're looking for different opportunities that we can bring more and more children back and give them those opportunities. So thank you very much. Mrs. Dino, I don't know if I answered your question or if you had another one for me.
I have one for now. So you said the distance will be changing from front to back. So if there happens to be a case and the contact tracing, will that change the contact tracing, being that the students will be closer?
It is possible. We do scoop, around that desk. So when you do put the desks in tighter, there is a possibility that you may add a 2, maybe, to 4 students, possibly, depending on the room, to who you're contact tracing. But, it obviously doesn't change the room that much. One of the things that, when we start talking about front to back, if you look at the desk you're sitting in right now, you're sitting in the chair, that's about a foot. You look at the desk in front of you, it's probably another 1.5 to 2 feet. So when we start condensing the distances, you're still keeping your at least 3 to 4 feet that you're sitting in. So we're not really talking about a massive number, but yes, we could be, quarantining a little bit more.
I have a question. Teachers typically keep the same classroom across the day?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Because different sections and different classes a teacher could have 12 kids in one class and 24 kids in another class.
That is a possibility.
Has it been looked into to see if there are any teachers in specific, and are the classrooms different sizes?
Well, we did actually talk about, because there are some spaces that are, I'll call them tighter than others. So if we do have a large class, we did talk about the possibility of changing the rooms for those time periods. So yes, that did come up. but I think that it's a little premature to decide which room certain periods may end up in until we know what numbers are coming back, because yes, those kind of adjustments would make sense. If you have larger spaces, you like to keep larger classes in it. When we first started with the hybrid model, we did that initially based on, who we saw coming back in September. That probably will actually be pretty accurate in the sense that if half the class was larger than the half of another class, there's a good chance that the whole class is larger than the whole other class. So it would be a couple minor tweaks here and there depending on who decides to come back.
And is that, so when the results come back in from the survey, is that something that's going to be looked at to see whether or not there needs to be an adjustment of what classes and what teachers are in certain classrooms?
Correct. That's typically what principals do in general when they schedule a building. So yes, that would be something that they can look at. Absolutely.
Thank you.
My question relates to the hallways during change of class time. Now you're doubling, if every kid goes back every day, you're doubling the amount of kids in the hallway. I understand this is a very small period of time, and if a child had COVID, for instance, the exposure would probably be very minimal, but was there anything looked at in relation to the hallway timing of the interchanges?
The hallways were not discussed by this subcommittee. We have had plenty of conversation about hallways in the past. Like you said, it is a fleeting exchange as opposed to something that, is more of, closer to that 10 to 15 minute duration. But what has happened, and this has been a real credit to all of our students here, is that the traffic flow has been very good in our hallways. We have, if you go outside of this room, you can see it in the high school, and it's very similar to our middle school buildings. There are arrows on the floor. They tell kids which way to go. And because it's one-way traffic, and the traffic is flowing, yes, there'll be more cars on the highway, so to speak, but, the kids do know which way to go, and it keeps it moving, which I think is the most important piece. As long as you keep the traffic moving, I think we're in a pretty good place. And the other piece, too, which again, this is something that, is very important to all the buildings. If we can get the windows open, which again, that's another reason why April was discussed. If those windows can stay open, we're having an air exchange throughout this building, which I think will, again, help with the, general control.
And the Department of Health has specifically stated those hallways, those are pass-throughs, and don't count pass-throughs as far as exposure.
Okay.
Okay. And the last subgroup was chaired by Mr. Reynes. So Mr. Reynes has been patiently waiting there in the corner. May I ask him to come up? Is it on? Is it on?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Task Force 4 for the high school had 3 meetings and serious discussions, and we originally had the intention of looking to see how we can bring the members of the class of 2021 back to the high school full-time, offer the opportunity to everyone in the senior class. And subsequently, we started talking about the juniors as well as the sophomores and freshmen. And so the group reached consensus on attempting to bring the seniors back with a start date of March 1. We have a survey at the high school site. We have about, as of yesterday, we had about 156 respondents. And from that response so far, it looks like we would have between 60 and 70% of the senior class looking to return. I've sent a message to all the remaining students in the high school and their families asking that they please respond so we can get an accurate number. But based on that number, and with the startup of athletics and other activities, class night and so forth, there may be students who are going to be self-selecting to stay home so that they won't have to worry about the potential of quarantining while their sports season is going on or while class night is taking place. And so while we'll be inviting the entire senior class back, we don't think that the entire senior class will take advantage of it for their own reasons, whether it's safety related, not wanting to quarantine if there is a case in the high school. We expect to be able to maintain the one-way hallways, one-way staircases, and we will have to put some desks into classrooms, but we will be looking to put the polycarbonate dividers up as well. And if things go well, and as we watch rates of incidents of COVID in the community, on Long Island, across the state, nationwide, and we have to keep an eye on those variants that are out there and are pretty virulent. If things go well, we would like to be able to invite the members of the junior class back April 12th. And subsequent to that, again, keeping an eye on things, invite both the sophomore class and freshman class back May 10th. So we have an overall plan to try and bring all of the students back. Again, we all know that there are a lot of variables involved, but families will be making their own decisions, but we all understand that it is important as the vaccine becomes more available, as rates of incidence goes down, and as people like myself end up getting COVID, that herd immunity over time will kick in, and by the time the warmer weather comes, April and May, we're hoping to be able to be in a place where we can have a much more normal operation here at the high school.
So I guess, Ms. Rainey, the one thing because the board has expressed its interest from the beginning to be able to get the kids back into the school as quickly as we could, and I was clear in my wording in the fall that there was no pathway to do that. I kind of like that vernacular. There's nothing there to do it. But it does seem as though the opportunity is beginning to come, and it's nice to see the committee had put some thought into it. And while some may be like, let's bring them all back at once, I think it's very prudent to do it in this type of manner because it allows us to assess our ability to handle that increase. And if others want to make sure that we continue to bring the other grades back in, they'll also continue to do what Dr. Burek's noted in her, which is now daily emails, that we are seem to be going in the right direction of what we're doing. So I appreciate the work that they did and creating a pathway for us to enable that to happen at some point. So I appreciate that work.
I just want to thank the members of the task force. We did have a lot of lively discussion, and there was a lot of effort there, a lot of concern about the students, the staff, and the community. So I thank you to them as well. All right?
Well, it's definitely not an easy issue. Anybody who's been paying attention to it for the last year knows that in a variety of different ways, it's a very sensitive topic with a variety of concerns on both sides. But this seems to be very prudent. It allows us to get the kids back, but does it in a measured way to make sure we could do it safely and appropriately. Mrs. Dino?
I have a few questions. One, I was curious who was on these committees. How many people, different constituency groups, were there students, teachers?
There were 2 high school students, 1 parent, 1 teacher, was Mr. Kirschenberg, and the high school administrators.
And now is that like on all of the levels similarly?
Yeah, except the other levels did not have students.
Okay, makes sense. And, as a parent, teacher, I understand the importance of having students in front of us. As someone who suffered greatly with COVID, I also understand the severity of it and the safety of it really concerns me. I just had a question regarding testing. Looking today at how Cuomo came out with 10% capacity could go into sporting events. If we're putting all these children in school, I want nothing more than all of our children and all of our staff to be safe. That has been something I've said from the beginning. Safety is the most, you can't change that if it, God forbid, something. So I was just wondering if testing was something that is being considered, was discussed on these committees at all. I know originally Cuomo had said in his yellow zones, and that fell by the wayside, and we prepared for that. But, along that vein, we said we're going to put seniors back and look and see how it goes, which I think is wonderful. Do we have a metric of a percentage? If this percentage shows that the numbers are rising, we're going to do this. Is there a metric set up to ensure the safety of the staff and students in our schools?
I think metrics were discussed all along, and in all of our subcommittees, we said, what is the metric?
Well, right.
You know, districts early on, and even Mayor de Blasio did it in the city, you know, if it hit 3%, and then when we quickly hit 3%, then he was stuck. So what is the right metric? And you see how this whole situation has been so fluid all year long, that none of us are scientists.
No,
So for us to create that metric, that's very difficult.
I just wonder if you were testing, if you could catch that asymptomatic case to stop the spread and keep the kids in more and protect everyone along the way and accomplish, I don't know.
Well, that would be great, but when we put out the call to get at least 20% for the testing, should we have fallen into one of those zones, which, as I predicted, the governor abandoned that, there were 2 buildings, we didn't even get that 20%. So if we can't get that 20%, if we start to invoke a mandatory testing, I'm not too sure we would get that cooperation.
Right, I know I've looked at other districts who've said like they're trying and they pushed it back and pushed it back. So, you know, and just looking at neighboring, you know, other districts that say they have very few students actually going to school. So it's just, I don't know. There's no good answers of making it.
Just in reference to the testing and the metrics, it seems, you know, a lot of people have given this thought, and it doesn't seem like there is a reliable metric out there.
No.
And truth be told, I'm not 100% sure how important the metric is, because every single time the numbers have risen within our district, the quarantining has come close to shutting us down for short periods of time with the numbers of teachers out and the inability to staff. So I think almost the situation has like a natural evolution that will take care of itself, that will keep these kids safe to a certain extent. You know, whereas when there are so many teachers and students quarantining, it kind of makes, to me, that's way more important than testing kids who are showing up every day.
I just have a quick question. I just want to make sure I understand the dates. So middle school students will have the option to go back full-time on April 12th?
Yes.
And 11th graders will have the option to go back on April 12th, but 9th and 10th graders, that won't be until May? Is there a reason that the 9th and 10th graders can't go back on April 12th also, when it seems like most of the district will already be back?
Just the volume of the students. So you're talking about more students on the high school level doing that. So as Mr. Arenas explained, we're bringing the seniors back first. We're going to see how that works, and then we're bringing the juniors, and then we're going to see how that works. We have to monitor this every single week before we bring back the, and he said it, if all goes well.
But I would agree with Ellen only in the sense that the March 1st seniors and the April 12th juniors, that's a 6 weeks difference.
Yeah, but there's a vacation.
There's a vacation in there.
Well, that's a
That's
big
why.
difference. I
think-
mean,
I
you're
think-
sending back high
Vacation
school
there,
kids
and
for
then there are
essentially 3
people-
weeks of school.
Yeah, and the seniors are pretty much at this point, I mean, I have a senior and want her back in school, you know, to enjoy some of her senior year, but it is kind of late April 12th to then, I don't know, there's no way to, if we're doing it,
When
I
do we
just
come back
think-
from that vacation?
Excuse me?
The vacation ends, what, March 30th?
That's 4 days after, like, it puts a 4-day gap between the
Right.
break and the kids returning. That's why April 12th was picked, was
I mean-
part of the reason.
Let
It's
me
a
just-
Monday.
I mean, the alternative is March 25th, and I don't think that's enough time in between the 10th and the 25th to truly gauge, you know, how it's going with the seniors.
And I think, Dr. The concern, I guess, in that plan is to make sure nothing happens on vacation to cause a big spike. So
Correct.
we come back vacation, wait for 4 days, make sure we don't see any
Because
spikes.
we've seen what happens.
Right.
We've seen what happens the week we return from a vacation. So we don't want to bring them back on that first week. We're going to wait, let that play out, let everyone who's going to stay home and need to quarantine and to reduce the exposure,
Right.
and then give them the opportunity to come back on the 12th.
No, and I'm
Juniors.
No, and I'm one that errs on the side of caution and is very, very careful about this. It just seems like the 9th and 10th graders are sort of really on the tail end of this, and all of middle schoolers that want to be back, and the 11th and 12th graders will be back. So it just seems, and I understand that might be the only way that we can do it. It just struck me as very late in the game for them.
Yeah, to piggyback off of Ellen, I mean, we've used a 2-week sort of metric because there's science behind that. I think 2 weeks is the longest time we've had any building on remote since September. So,
Because that was the quarantine period.
Right, so I see these 6-week blocks, it's about 6 weeks in between these dates and these grades. And I'm just kind of wondering, is there any way we can shrink that down a bit in between getting these grades in a little sooner if the numbers hold?
The only response, I would like to see that also. I think the problem we have is the vacation coming in between. The last thing we want to do is bring the juniors back in before vacation and then have all these spikes afterwards, and it blows up our plan. I think if we didn't have that vacation, which always has the potential to see spikes, as we've seen, people are going to go, the weather's going to get nice, people may start to do things, so that I like having that 4-day buffer to make sure we don't see a spike and an increase in numbers. Without that, I think we could have done that. I mean, I think it would make sense.
No, it's definitely smart to play it safe. It's just.
This did come up as part of the discussion with the task force. These dates are not solid. Even that March 1st date is not a solid date, because while we can get the desks, the classroom desks in the rooms, I don't know if we have the polycarbonate, all of the polycarbonate that we're going to need, and how long it may take to get it and get it installed. So I'm thinking that these dates are somewhat flexible, and just from the committee's discussion, that these dates are somewhat flexible, and we just need to be concerned. There's that term called viral load, and as you bring students back, that viral load won't only be in the classrooms. Right now, the classrooms are not crowded, but the classrooms will become crowded. The hallways will become crowded. And if you're increasing the load in the hallways where the circulation of air isn't as good, I'm just concerned that, okay, those, we haven't experienced it. I'm trying to play it, and I think the committee is trying to play it safe and do it in a measured way. Those dates are not set in stone.
Well,
Right.
Mr. Rainey, there's two things about the dates, and Dr. Lynch, I'm sure, is going to weigh in a couple of seconds, because we definitely want to be as definitive as we can, at least on the physical barriers type of issue. If you're now indicating the date for the juniors, sophomores, and freshmen, which may not be dependent upon partitions, you may see better progress than you thought. And I assume that you as who runs the high school may say, you know what, our numbers are great. We're able to handle this load, and I guess we have to understand the possibility that you may move up one of those based upon that. But we definitely want to be able to at least be clear, Dr. Lynch, on making sure we're able to get whatever apparatuses we need.
Everything
in.
that needs to be ordered has been ordered.
Right.
I
So
have
And
a question regarding, when I'm looking over my notes, the elementary and the middle, they mentioned the spacing between the desks. What will the spacing be? I mean, will they be on top of each other? Will we rearrange
The
classrooms?
spacing will need to be somewhat altered. There will be more desks in each classroom. We have 2 measures of safety in the classrooms currently, and we're going to continue that. The masks plus the polycarbonate. Now, they say masks and distance are what is needed. We have a layer in there that is not required. We're going to continue with that, and we're hopeful that as the weather improves, as was said with the other committees, windows are open, airflow is better, and while you may have some more students in the building and in the classrooms, in all, there will be air circulating, and there will be families that are going to be opting to not participate for their own reasons, whether it's safety, whether it's family, whether it's concerned about quarantining and participation in activities because, you know, March 1, other sports kick in, and it's going to be a busy spring on the athletic fields. And people want to participate.
Will it be required that the windows are open or recommended that the windows are open?
It's recommended that the windows open. I know that in the fall and into November, we had a warm fall, right? Those windows were open all the time in the classrooms, and I think everybody feels better with that circulation. Right now, it's just a little cold.
And also, Mr. Rainey, this is not a decision you're making in a vacuum. I mean, we see the national trend. Even the CDC, who came out in the beginning and talked about the alerts and the concerns, is beginning to indicate by their studies that the schools do not seem to be an area of transmission, high transmission. We're seeing that ourselves. So at least, again, I like the time and the phasing, which, of course, you can adjust. If for some reason you want to change it, it's just a question of notifying. The infrastructure is there. The structure for the day is there and so forth. So I like the plan.
In the high school, hybrid still be an option, or?
Hybrid will still be an option. Hybrid will still be an option. We're not looking to reinvent it, and I think that if we eliminate that hybrid option, we're either going to have a really crowding situation or an absenteeism situation. So I think that allowing families to continue to stay with the hybrid track, if things are successful for that family and things are working for that family, I'm not interested in upsetting their lives at this point in the year.
And just to piggyback on that, you know, at the middle school level, we talked about offering the hybrid as an option, but we don't penalize kids for joining remotely. So if you wanted to keep your kid home every other day, that's your prerogative. We think that there's going to be, like Mr. Reynes had mentioned in the high school, more one-offs when people have something going on in their lives, or maybe larger extensive time depending on sports and other obligations that, you know, children don't want to be quarantined for. So, you know, it's semantics whether or not you say you keep the hybrid, because we don't, like I said, penalize a kid for joining their class remotely.
I just think of the situation where someone's a contact of a contact and the parent is being extra cautious. You wouldn't want to take that away, you know.
Correct, and that's why being able to remote in on any of the days that you need to remote in kind of accomplishes that. So.
Okay. Do the students have to notify the teacher if they are staying home and logging in remotely, or is it a matter of the teacher looks in the classroom, takes attendance, and sees so-and-so is not in their seat and just looks and sees that they are remote?
Well, it's supposed to be, if you're supposed to be in person, you're supposed to notify the school as a parent to let the school know that you know your kid's staying home. You know, so if you are supposed to be in attendance, you know, you're supposed to let the school know. So if you're going to keep your kid out for a week, it would be nice to send something early in the week and say, look, you know, my kid's going to be out for this week, just so everybody's on the same page. Because we don't want the other piece too, and this is something back from one of our earliest committees. We don't want kids staying at home and their parents not to know they're in the house. You know, and that's another concern that I know many of the parents brought up very early on, and we don't want that to happen. So that's why that notification piece is very important.
Dr. Bjork, are there programs out there that would come in, because I just know the difficulty of getting a vaccine. Are there programs out there that would come into the districts, say like you get a program to come in and vaccinate Lynbrook teachers if they wanted it?
So actually, I was trying to get a gauge of how many of our staff members have been vaccinated, because I was asked for that number to see if a company would come in and use one of our buildings as a vaccination site.
We had a similar survey.
Mm-hmm. And do we think that that's going to be a possibility? That we can?
There are a lot of promises that the state makes that have not come through. So I'm not hopeful, but I wanted to participate. I wanted to say, you know, we're in. I don't want to turn down an opportunity, but I'm not going to lose sleep over waiting for that answer.
And we've expressed that, Leslie, I know I've expressed it to Kaminsky, if that opportunity exists, to have our teachers vaccinated and make it available.
And I know he did, I know he reached out to me, and I believe he reached out to Dr. Burak and the local superintendents. They had gotten an extra, not a lot, of vaccinations, and they earmarked them for educators and did reach out to us. But by the time we sent the notification, they were gone.
Yeah, but teachers are beginning to move up on the priority list, so that's, I would continue to say to him, and as I said, listen,
Yes, I
we're
have.
we're a site that's available, and you can do our teachers right here if the teachers want that, so.
Correct.
Well, teachers have been, it has been readily available to teachers for a while, but, in theory. But
theory.
there's no,
theory.
it's very tough to get appointments for vaccines.
But that's what would be great to be able to have our politicians, bring the doses here and set up a schedule for our staff members right here.
And I
Correct.
almost wonder if they could facilitate something with the local hospitals, because I know the healthcare workers were getting the vaccinations in the hospitals, and that was not open to teachers or, staff in buildings, but I would imagine they're getting close to their second, vaccination, so maybe they could open those centers if.
But remember, there are some school districts that have hospitals within their boundary lines. Those school districts were able to partner with those
Oh, they
hospital
were.
systems and get staff members
I
vaccinated.
didn't know that.
Well, I definitely think if it's at all possible to, put a program in place for any teacher who would want it, it'd be advantageous to the district as a whole. Also, Dr. Beer, you mentioned before that part of the reason why we're staggering the return of the high school kids is because of the volume of the students, right, coming into the high school building. But I guess my question is the volume of the students coming to the building proportional to the size of the building versus, the other building? I'm ignorant to it. I don't know. Is the high school a bigger building than South and?
Well, it's a bigger building, but when you look at even the hallways of Lynbrook High School are narrower than the hallways of North and South.
Because it's an older building.
It's a 100-year-old building. So that's just how it was created. And we keep saying that the size of the high school classes are just so much smaller.
True, but the hallway is less of a concern due to what you said before.
Right, because of the passing, yes.
So I guess my question then is, within the classrooms, in terms of social distancing, in terms of desks, because there are more classrooms and maybe more square footage, would it be compatible to the other buildings? I know we're catering to more kids in this building, but in terms of the actual distancing within the rooms, would it be similar to the other buildings? There might be more rooms,
Classrooms in
but
the high school are smaller than the classrooms in
We
the other
we did
buildings.
on Task Force 3, we took a look at that, and the high school classrooms
Because it's
are
small.
significantly
Yeah,
smaller than our
okay.
middle school classrooms.
Okay, thank you.
I mentioned months ago, a lot of our high school classes are just over 500 square feet. That's not large.
And would we look at possibly, based on how many children are coming back, moving classrooms to accommodate?
They've been doing that right along. Every
Okay,
time we've
perfect.
made a change to our reopening plan, the high school has been, there's a tremendous amount of logistics.
Oh,
And I have to, I'm very proud of the teachers, the administration, the students, and how everyone has really worked together and have revisited this and tried to make it as safe. And I think this district, and while maybe not everyone agrees, this district has made prudent decisions to bring back people in a safe environment for everyone, for staff and for teachers. And I think going slowly, we have made the prudent decision to do so. And even the staggering of this return, we want to really monitor when we bring in an additional group of students. Let's monitor that situation before we start, bringing everyone in without knowing what the impact's going to be. Because the last thing you want to do is say, you know what, we can't handle this, folks. We're going to shut down for a while and regroup. You don't want that to happen.
And I agree with that, and I'm a firm believer in being cautious. It just stood out to me that there was a difference with the high school plan versus the middle school plan. And sort of the same thing that,
And don't
Pat.
forget, middle school years are tough years also. You have to take that, we're talking about mental health all year long. Those middle school kids need that support in school, I think, even more so than some of your older adolescents.
No, and that's a very valid point, and these are all things that, it's good to understand what went into the thinking behind the committees. Because for those of us, most of us that weren't sitting on the committees, at least we can understand why what was, done, what was done.
Moving on, Dr.
All right,
Beer.
I'm still doing my update. So obviously, and it was mentioned before, please look for March 5th. There will be another survey, another commitment survey we'll be putting out so that we can gather the information of who wishes to change their model to an in-person model. I also just want to mention, as part of the board goal of reviewing the reopening plan, we said we would put out a survey. So in my Friday bulletin scheduled for February 26th, I'm just going to put out a general survey just so that we can get some feedback
in the areas of communication, the learning management system, the green and gold models. So we'll be putting that out to the community, and you'll see that in my Friday, February 26th bulletin. In addition to the committee work that was just shared, and even Dr. Balekis mentioned reconvening some more in-person clubs on the middle school level, we also have to keep the hybrid model because you have to allow the remote students to hybrid in to the clubs also. The high school, by the way, has been offering to over 20 clubs this year already. They've been hybrid, they've been virtual, but they're actually going to increase. We're going to add the Culinary Arts Club back in, the Culture or that Spanish Club, the GSA, the Marine Club, Robotics, and Women in STEM. And we're encouraging that in addition to the virtual, we're going to offer more in-person. Obviously, the Culinary Arts is going to be in-person because the kids are going to get a chance to cook. I also just want to take an opportunity to reiterate two protocols that would really, truly help everyone in the district, especially as we work towards bringing more students back. Lately, we felt the impact from families not following one of them, and I just want to make this clear so that everyone understands what the protocol is. If anyone in the household is suspect of having COVID symptoms, and that person happens to be going for a test that day because they're exhibiting symptoms, everyone in the household needs to stay home, okay? You can't assume, oh, it must not be COVID, you know, it's okay to send the kids in. And I'm talking even if mom or dad has the symptoms and is going for a COVID test. Those children should be staying home because if mom and dad come back positive, then that child is a direct contact, and now we have increased the exposure. So you've heard me all along say we're trying to mitigate the exposure, we're trying to reduce the numbers of quarantines. So that's one protocol. I just want to make sure everyone understands that as a protocol. The other one I just want to reiterate as we approach the February break, and we were just talking about this, about potential spikes after breaks. The protocol is, for families who are considering traveling during this break, you need to follow the New York State Department of Health quarantine restrictions. Travelers arriving in New York State following out-of-state travel are required to complete a mandatory 10-day quarantine period for asymptomatic individuals. You do have the opportunity to test out of this quarantine period if you obtain a test within 3 days of departure, so one test within 3 days of departure from the state you're coming from, prior to arrival in New York. And then upon arrival in New York, you must quarantine for 3 days, and on day 4 of your quarantine, obtain another COVID test. If both tests come back negative, you may exit the quarantine early upon receipt of the second negative diagnostic test. Okay? So I just want to make sure everyone's clear, and this is recorded so people can play it back so that you understand that. You need 2 negative tests in order to reduce the quarantine, the 10-day mandatory quarantine. So that's for anyone who is traveling out of state, except for the contiguous states. So New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Vermont, you do not need to follow that protocol. But I know that people are traveling. So
do those have to be PCR tests, rapid tests, either? Do they specify that?
It doesn't specify. You just need to prove the
I think it's either. But Dr. Burek, is the school going to be asking for that documentation? Or is that just a state thing?
That's the state thing.
So it's the
We're
honor
hoping
system.
that people are honest. Fortunately, Lynbrook's a small community. We do find out some things. You know, we've had to reach out to parents and say, we understand you were somewhere, and we try to cut it off because we really are trying to mitigate that spread and stop kids from coming in if they've been traveling.
So if somebody came to school after if a child came to school after vacation and it somehow was known that they were away, there would be a phone call for the parents to come pick them up?
We've reached out. We've made phone calls. Absolutely. Okay. As long as we get that information.
And but legally in that situation, if you ask the parent for their 3-day test and they refuse to give it, what legal authority do we have to say a kid can't come back into school? Yeah, we can. So we can say until you show us that test based on the state law. Okay, good.
Okay. The last item in my report is just next year's calendar. Tonight, the board will be adopting the parameters for next year's school calendar. I hope that everyone understood my explanation of the snow days and the contingency days that were in last week's Friday bulletin. Because we have contingency days this year, you'll see that the 183 calendar day and how the holidays fall for next year, we have no contingency days in next year. So I just want you to keep in mind. So based on the information I shared last week, once we use those 3 snow days next year, we would have to dip into holiday breaks and recess breaks because there are no contingency days. It's just the way the holidays fell in. So I'm hoping for a dry 2022 season, so we don't have to use them. And that's my COVID report. I also just wanted to take a moment this year, since Founders Day, the PTA could not have their traditional Founders Day evening. We just did an announcement. I just wanted to do a public shout out to all of the PTA Founders Day honorees. One of them is sitting amongst us, and I know she's uncomfortable right now as I say this. So the Lynbrook Council of PTAs recognize Mrs. O'Donovan and Mrs. Pignataro, who have been outstanding. I have to tell you, they have been outstanding PTA council presidents, especially through this very difficult time working with me. So I personally appreciate all that they've done. Lynbrook High School, Mrs. Vicki Boyle and Dr. Tinaba. Lynbrook North, Mrs. Moore and Mrs. Toscano. Lynbrook SEPTA, Mrs. Almonte, Mrs. Geiser, and Mrs. Manasakis. Lynbrook South, Mr. Schneck and Mrs. Votano. Marion Street, Mrs. Garaputo and Mrs. Macchia. Waverly Park, Mrs. Segley. And West End, Mrs. Gerby and Mrs. LaBarbara, who actually was here earlier today. So congratulations to all of those honorees. Budget update, and I know we touched a little bit before with the state aid. Do you have anything else to add?
Pretty much.
Okay, so we shared the state aid woes that we have for next year. And the last item under my report is the curriculum update. Dr. Belekas?
Thank you, Dr. Bjork. I know that it's getting late and I don't want this to get lost in the shuffle here, but we've got a lot of great things still happening this year, despite all of the challenges that are going on. The kids really do have a lot of exciting educational opportunities. One such lesson that's occurred recently, Mrs. Castellano's 4th grade class at Marion Street did a really cool science and technology project. To culminate their nonfiction unit of study, they actually all researched different types of extreme weather, such as earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, and floods. And they started really utilizing our technology to its fullest. So they used a nonfiction Padlet full of useful websites, informational videos, articles, information books that were all available to them in their classroom to become experts on their topics. The groups synthesized their research into subtopics and created really cool looking newscasts to present their information. They used a green screen, an iPad, an iMovie, and it really brought the broadcast to life. The students were able to also import and edit their videos by adding images, backgrounds, and music, and everybody really had a great time while learning in a multidisciplinary fashion. So thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Boggs. And oh my goodness, I do have one more thing I just want to publicly announce. As you know, one of the activities we have provided for the middle school kids, we kept the teen center going this year. And while it's been a small number, it's been about 20 students who have been routinely attending Friday night. The last evening, there's only one more evening schedule left in the teen center program. So I just want to share that. The kids who have been attending it, and they have all, if you can see that they have all signed this, wrote me a note, Dr. Burak. It has come to our attention that there is one more week of Teen Center. We really enjoy going, and this is our only time to hang out with friends, especially because of the A through L and M through Z days. We would love it if you can continue it. So I just want to make a public announcement that while it's still winter and we can't go outside and play, we will extend the Teen Center program through March 19th so that the kids have a couple of more weeks of the Teen Center. So, you know, when the kids write me directly, they pull at my heartstrings, so they get it. Okay, I'm finished now.
Thank you, Dr. Burek. Anything else on the board? Moving on to public comments. If you'd like to address the board, please come up to the microphone, identify yourself, and whether you live in or out of the district.
Hi. Good evening. My name's Andrew Lunar. I have 2 children in the district, one at Waverly and one in the middle school south. First of all, I want to thank all the committees and the board for working on the plan that was announced. I think it's a fantastic plan. It gets the kids back, and it does it on a measured way that takes safety and expediency both into account. Mr. Belmont, I think you mentioned, and I think Mr. Reynes mentioned, one of the nice features of the high school plan was that it was phased, so we could see what happens as each grade comes back and then have some time. Why not adopt the same approach in the middle school? We know, and I know from being on the second task force, that the middle schools have the most room to bring kids back. The high school is much more difficult. Why not do the same thing with the 8th graders? Why not bring back the 8th graders on, I think the date is March 5th, the 7th graders and the 6th graders on April 12th? Is there a reasoning that this was not done in phases for the middle school?
Sorry, that was not something that came up at our committee. Our goal was to try to return the students as soon as possible. We do think that given, like it was mentioned earlier, the differences in spacing, the ability to control traffic flow, if you look at the way the buildings are constructed, it's much easier to actually control the way kids are moving and moving these massive number of kids. We also don't have to worry about, in the middle schools, one of the concerns in the high school always is lunchtime. We don't have the same lunch concerns. We have the kids in school for lunch, so there are a lot of other variables that we're able to control.
I think you're misunderstanding the question. I think
Right.
I agree with, I'm not saying it should be not at once, but if the high school can do it on March 5th, why is the middle school waiting till April 2nd, April 12th? That's the question. And would the middle school consider, as the high school is, taking the most senior class, the 8th graders, who are the seniors of middle school, and letting them come back on March 5th, just like the seniors of the high school are, and then bringing back the next grades later? I'm not saying you're wrong for bringing them back at once, but what I'm saying is, and you're saying that the phased approach wasn't considered, but now we've heard a plan from Mr. Reynes, which I think is excellent. I think the phasing is excellent. That's not to criticize the other plans, but would you take that plan and maybe reconsider your own plan to help accelerate getting those 8th graders back? Because I, for one, have an 8th grade son. He's had basically a year of middle school at this point, and he's about to leave the middle school. I think one of the other members recognized middle school are some tough years. We need to get those kids back sooner. The plan is excellent, but why not make it better and adopt the feature from Mr. Reynes's plan of bringing back those most senior kids on March 5th? Let's use them as I don't want to say a test case, but let's see how that integrates, and that may even give you more information for how you're going to be able to bring back your 7th and 6th graders on April 12th.
Yeah, I will tell you, we looked at earlier dates, and most people felt more compelled to wait until the weather was nicer. And I know that's where the initial date in April came from, that, March can still be cold. People wanted the windows wide open. That was something that was important to a lot of the committee members. That doesn't mean we can't go back and reconsider, but I will tell you, these kind of conversations did happen. People felt more comfortable with their younger children at that April date was the one that, people landed on our committee.
No, and I respect that. I know each committee is independent and met separately. But what I'm asking the board and your committee to consider is, we just heard an excellent feature, a feature that, quite frankly, was better than the other plans, which is it allows one grade, it's still one grade, to get in quicker and sooner and get those kids back in school where their mental health, social and emotional well-being can be addressed. If we can get those kids back in 5 weeks earlier for the 8th graders, they're the seniors of the middle school. Let's get that for them too. So I would ask you to reconsider that one feature of the middle school plan, because there's no reason not to. If it can be done at the high school, it can be done at the middle school. In fact, the CDC and the New York DOH has already found that high school seniors are more akin to adults with respect to COVID transmission. They have a higher viral load. They get sicker. The middle school kids are more akin to, they're younger. They have more of a subdued reaction. There's virtually been no severe, I don't want to say none, but it's been a much lower mortality rate at the younger ages than the higher age. If it's safe to bring the 12th graders back, who are full-grown men and women, it's certainly safe to bring back the 8th graders. So again, I would just ask your committee and the board to reconsider, because if we could accelerate this plan even for one grade in the middle school, why not?
Yeah, I think logistically at this point to do it for March 5th may be tough because we do have a break coming up, next week. So if we
Okay,
were
but-
going to reconsider, it may be somewhere in between.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean we can't have discussions.
Sure, no, yes, and I recognize that we're all going to be gone for the break, and quite frankly, I actually like the idea of giving it a week to even 2 weeks after the break to see how that spike plays out, because we've seen spikes after every break. But 2 weeks after that break gets you to March 15th, 16th, not April 12th. So I'd ask you to just reconsider that, and maybe at the next, before the next meeting.
Sure. And again, I would leave that up to the board if they wanted to send that back to the committee to reconsider or not.
Okay, and the only other item I want to mention, which is not quite a global issue, but on the elementary level, this year we see drop-off. It was originally later. It's now 8:30 to 8:45. It used to be 8:15 to 8:45. I know at Waverly Park, it is a disaster during drop-off because you have all the kids in that traffic circle in a 10-minute period. Waverly, the street, Waverly, is completely backed up. Would the board and the committee consider moving back the drop-off time to 8:15 to 8:45? It actually is COVID safer. Having all those kids arriving in a very narrow 15-minute band actually is congestive. Having the drop-off like it used to be from 8:15 to 8:45 spreads that same number of kids over twice as much time, and it alleviates some of that congestion. So from a safety and traffic standpoint, I think that's something that should be considered, because I hear it's bad at Marion Street as well. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's really bad now with the snow in front of Waverly. It's backed up all the way to.
Yeah, the snow has made it so much worse. It was bad even before then, but the snow has made it horrendous. So I just think if there's a way to do it, even if we extend that drop-off period by a few minutes, it really may help from a traffic safety standpoint, and also a congestion at the entrance standpoint. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Megan O'Donovan, resident and parent. I'm not here as PTA counsel tonight, and this is my first public comment, so please be nice. I wanted to take a minute and thank the board for your support of high school winter sports. My son started with the basketball program last week, and it's going really well.
Did they win?
I believe so.
Okay.
But I was on my way here at the end of the game, but I think I heard that they won. Okay, good. So I wanted to say that I definitely agree with the board allowing 2 spectators per senior athlete, but I'm here tonight to talk about the spectators for the freshmen and the sophomore and the juniors, who I know would love an opportunity to see a game in person. And I was wondering if you would consider reconsidering your position on spectators.
Hi there, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
The spectator issue, when it came up and sort of it was arrived at, it's amazing how quickly things change. When that was decided, there were 2 districts. One was not doing sports at all. One was doing sports, but if you did a high-risk sport, you forfeited your in-person learning, and almost nobody was having spectators. I think actually nobody was having spectators at the time when we spoke. 2 were, and now a lot of that has changed. The 2 schools have reversed. Those 2 schools who weren't having sports, they have reversed that decision.
You don't mean weren't having sports?
On,
You use the word.
yeah, but, okay, just, so, I think we want to get people safely into that gym as spectators. We understand that this is, at least I understand that this is a priority for parents. We're going to continue talking about this, and at least I'm going to continue to push to get some spectators in there safely. Do we have a number? No. But I think that's something we'd like to see. That's a reasonable request. I would like to see that request granted.
From my perspective, the district has very good safety protocols in place. I mean, for instance, when I came in this evening, I had my temperature taken. I filled out my health form. If you look at the size of, say, the basketball team, they have 15 players. I believe there are 6 seniors on the team. So that leaves 9 remaining players. If you allow 1 spectator per player, then perhaps we're talking about 9 additional spectators in the gymnasium.
Can I just give a little background?
Sure.
When the governor decided that high-risk sports could continue, he passed it to the counties to determine what they were going to do. Suffolk County made a decision that covered every county and every district, and they were all uniform.
Yes, I'm aware, yes.
Okay. Nassau County left it up to each individual district. So at the time that the decision was made, and it was all happened so quickly, we had a couple of days to decide, there were no other surrounding districts. I believe there were 2 other districts that were allowing limited number of spectators, and none of the other districts in Nassau County were doing so. So part of the thinking behind the 2 spectators allowed for seniors was because they're seniors, they are graduating, this may be their last time, probably their last time playing a sport unless they're going to play in college, but it's still their last time playing in Lynbrook, and that was how the decision came about.
Yep. No, I understand that. I do also, I understand that there are other districts in our area that have expanded and have started to allow more spectators. So my question really is if the board would reconsider the decision for Lynbrook.
Are the other sports teams that are occurring right now of similar size? So, I mean, the rationale that she's saying with 9 additional, if we allowed 1 person, I don't know how that's monitored, or, you know,
Well,
to see.
we're really only talking about basketball, because that's an indoor.
Is that not wrestling?
Wrestling,
Yeah,
too.
but wrestling,
Yes.
there's no spectator. Oh, we did say seniors.
Seniors.
Right.
So I'm just trying to envision how many people we're talking, because if we're really talking about 9 additional, the space is large enough to spread out, take their temperature. My only thought would be that there are parents who might want to watch that won't feel comfortable, and I wouldn't want to eliminate the option to view it from home if that's something that's.
Well, there's a lot more wrestlers than there are basketball players, I would,
Yeah. Like how many-
typically. So, I mean, I guess this is something.
I'll have to get back to you with that.
Okay, I don't know how large a wrestling team is, it's not something I'm familiar with.
So is this something that we are going to look into, or is this like a fluid thing? Or is this?
Just remember, the season's 1
We
month.
could,
Right, the season's almost over.
Season's going to be over.
so we could do this. The board can authorize Mr. Morelli in the athletic department, and Dr. Barrett weigh in on this, if he wants to evaluate what he sees going on, and if he believes that, if the board gives a consensus to that,
Open it up to juniors?
we can allow him to make a determination based upon what he's seeing and what he's seeing. Because again, the phrase we keep using, you know, we're writing playbooks where none have been written before, so if it makes the board comfortable, he can confer with his other colleagues, see what they're doing, and maybe just like with the opening of school, maybe they're feeling comfortable after the initial movement of the seniors, and if he's comfortable, the board won't have to reconvene, and we can defer to his judgment on what he believed would be the right way to handle that. Would that make everybody comfortable?
I mean, could we get an idea of what our quadrant is doing, what the other districts are doing? I mean.
Well, he's not going to be able to inform us in the time, so we just have to decide.
The vast majority of the county is not allowing
Correct.
spectators.
Still, okay.
The vast majority.
And I believe-
But, as Mrs. O'Donovan said, since the initial survey was done, some have changed their minds.
But
Probably based on the reason that some of us are allowing.
But from what I'm
spectators.
understanding, it's not just a request to allow juniors and seniors. This was a request to allow freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. having spectators?
Because there could be a sophomore or.
Well, the idea is we're not going to be able to micromanage it without meetings. So the idea is just to turn to the athletic department and say, if you see it's safe and it's palatable and it makes sense to go out and increase it to whatever he thinks is a reasonable amount considering what.
But it might be a per sport decision.
We'd either have to
Okay.
reconvene or let him just make that decision.
Well, we only made decisions for this season anyhow, correct?
Correct, but it might be something that.
But
he
Mrs.
might-
Marcus is referring to particular sports in this season.
Oh,
He might determine it's safe to do that for basketball, but not safe to do that for wrestling. I
Correct.
mean, that is a possibility.
Correct.
Would it be easier to do this with just a number of people, a maximum occupancy, as opposed to a grade by grade?
The ruling
Since
is 2 per spectator, or 50%,
two,
which would but no more than two per player. 2 spectators per player.
okay,
That's the max we're allowed.
That's the Nassau County.
That's New York State.
per team or per grade?
2 spectators per player.
Per player, okay.
It appears to me that we are not going to have a consensus on the specifics of that. So being that the board is open to the possibility of increasing what's done already, the best person in a position to make that determination would be the athletic director. He can gather the information, he can see what's happening, and we'll defer to his judgment if we're good with that as to what he believes is the right thing to do. And we'll see if he handles the pressure as well. But it's so fast changing. Decisions.
I don't know, we got a shout out before. but
Right.
I feel,
Yeah, Yeager warmed them up for that already. But things are changing rapidly, so
No, I
based upon, he's in the best position, his boots on the ground, as we like to say, to see what's happening, confer with his colleagues to see what changes they're making, and the board trusts that judgment at this point.
No, I appreciate you looking into it for me and being receptive to my question. Thank you.
Good job, Pileski. Pull that back.
Good evening, Craig Kirschenberg, President of the Teachers Association. I'm here, I have a lot I'd actually like to share tonight. I'll start by piggybacking off of that conversation about the spectators, just because it strikes me that we're talking about whether we can have 20 spectators in the gym, but potentially 30 students in the classroom, totally fine. And it's baffling. It's really baffling that we're not taking more consideration for the health and safety of our staff and our students. You know, I hear every day from members of the Teachers Association who are deeply concerned. They're all watching tonight. I'm sure if you check out the viewers on YouTube, it's probably twice what it normally is, because they are deeply concerned. The previous task force committees were done very much in the spirit of cooperation. And I recall the Board of Ed meeting following Phase 3, in which Mr. Belmont asked the question, are the teachers okay with this? Are they okay with the plan, as discussed? And the answer at that time was yes. It was developed in cooperation, in the spirit of cooperation. And the teachers and the LTA leadership, we were an active part of the process. Not everybody agreed all the time, but we talked and we listened and we researched and we went on a tour of all the different buildings in the district and we measured desks and we came to actual consensus as committee as to what an acceptable distance was. We sat there with tape measures And Dr. Lynch and Mr. Seda sat there with their tape measures, and we moved desks and said, okay, is 4.5 feet okay? Is, 4 feet and a few inches okay? And we decided with true consensus that 4.5 feet was what was acceptable, and that's what we did. That whole process that brought us through that point, I can't say that the same has been followed this time around. In phase 4, our voices have not been heard the same way. The word consensus, as mentioned tonight, regarding those plans, as far as consensus goes, you don't have the teachers in agreement with any of it. And it's important that you know that, and that's why I'm standing here tonight. The subcommittees put forth these plans really without genuine discussion. I sat on one of the committees, on one of those subcommittees. The dates, the plans, all that stuff, it was fed to us. I made my arguments. Dr. Lynch was there as well. He sat there listening to all of my arguments. And ultimately, it was all kind of decided beforehand. I made my points, and I tried to be heard, but I wasn't heard. And Mr. Agello sitting over there, he sat on the elementary committee, and he would tell you the same thing. The teachers on those subcommittees, we raised objections, and we have a few objections, but I'll tell you the primary one, which is we did all of this work for months and months to keep our people safe in the building, and we decided 4.5 feet was what was going to do it. And I'm pretty proud to say, and I don't want to speak for administration, but I think they would say the same, that it's a good thing, a really good thing that we really haven't seen the spread of the virus in the buildings. And we've seen minimal impact in terms of school closures. And why is that? It's because of what we did to get here, and it was done together. And now all of a sudden it's just going to be abandoned. Our opinions and all the work that we did leading up to this point that has kept everybody safe, it's just going to be abandoned. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. The numbers are still high. The only thing that seems to have changed the conversation is the fact that Cuomo gave the go-ahead for high-risk sports. And why did he do that? Quite simply, political pressure. I think we all know that. I don't think anybody can pretend that in the middle of a pandemic, it's safe for kids to roll around on a mat together or play basketball. And I know the rhetoric by so many people is, well, if it's safe for wrestling and basketball, why not bring all the kids back into the classroom? I get it, except that it's not safe. I'm not sure why we're doing it. I'm really not sure. I think it's the sports that has revitalized this discussion. But out in Suffolk County, it was mentioned before, they kind of set their own rules for the county, and one of those rules is weekly testing, which we don't have here. Now, a lot of schools in Nassau are doing it, but we're not. And what has happened in Suffolk? I don't know if you saw Newsday. 16 Suffolk high school teams must quarantine on the first day of high-risk sports. I mean, we can't pretend that this is safe just because we want our kids to play sports. I get it for the social, emotional health and feeling connected to all the things that they do. I get it. I've been teaching teenagers for a long time. I have teenagers of my own at home. I get it, of them wanting to do things and feel connected, but we're still in a pandemic. And we have to keep our people in the building safe. So let me just say this. I needed to come here tonight and stand before you on behalf of the more than 350 teachers and nurses and social workers and psychologists and guidance counselors and speech therapists and teacher assistants and teacher aides and all the people who I represent, who I hear from every single day, concerned about their health and safety. Concerned because, we're here. We show up every day that we can when we're not being quarantined ourselves. We're here to educate the children and keep them safe and to support them, to support their social and emotional well-being. We go above and beyond for the kids, for the district, but it's important to recognize the sacrifices that we have made of our own safety and our own lives, from our own families. And we must account for the safety in the classrooms. And to seemingly arbitrarily come up with new plans after all the work that we did that decreases the distance between desks and packs more kids in a room, honestly, the word that comes to mind is irresponsible. And I'm here tonight on behalf of every member of the Lynbrook Teachers Association to tell you we are deeply concerned about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirk.
I know I already spoke, but since there's not a lot of other parents in the audience, I do want to respond to what I just heard. Mr. Kirschenberg's a great guy. I like him very much personally. He's an Islander fan. I think very highly of him. But what I just heard is the most morally indefensible position on the COVID issue that I may have ever heard. Okay? The CDC has come out and said that kids need to be back in school. The New York State Department of Health has said kids need to be back in school. Republican leaders, Democrat leaders, people across all political spectrum agree that kids need to be back in school. There's also a universally recognized truism that the kids are suffering mentally, emotionally, and socially from not being back in school. That doesn't even touch upon the educational deficits that our kids are suffering from not being in school. The hybrid model does not work. I heard Mr. Kirschenberg say that the teachers are concerned for their health and safety, and that's a fair concern. But the counterbalancing concern is the health and safety of our children, not the physical health, but also the mental, emotional, and social health, because our kids are suffering. I can't tell you how many hundreds of parents I've spoken to in this community, because they know that I'm active on this issue, and they're getting emails and calls daily saying, please get our kids back in school. My daughter doesn't get out of bed all day. My son won't get off the couch. My kid is depressed. He's put on weight. He can't get out of bed. This is a common refrain I'm hearing from parents in this community and across the country. Now, again, I respect the teachers have been in. They've done everything that's been asked of them. But the teachers don't get to decide when our kids go back to school. They're a voice to be considered, just like the parents are. I will tell you, I sat on the committee that Mr. Kirschenberg was referring to, where he said it was agreed that 4.5 feet of spacing was the right spacing. It was not agreed. I was on that committee. I vehemently disagreed. There were 2 other parent members on that committee who vehemently disagreed. There was a doctor on that committee who actually works with COVID children and COVID adults in the Brooklyn area that was hardest hit during the pandemic. We asked him at the committee if we reduce the spacing to 3 feet from 4.5. 3 feet, by the way, is what New York State requires with masks. We have masks and polycarbonate shields, so we're going above and beyond. That doctor said, perfectly fine with that reduction, no increase in risk at all to the students. I understand that at the last task force, the district doctor was present at one of the meetings, and the district doctor was asked that question, and the district doctor said that reducing the spacing between desks does not present an additional risk. With respect to the teachers, I went on a facilities tour. I took off 2 days of work to go from building to building with tape measures measuring desks. And the one thing I will say is that for the middle and high school teachers, they have an 8-foot bubble around their desks. So if we reduce the spacing between students, that has no impact on how close those students are to the teachers. Yes, it's more people in the building. Yes, there are more opportunities for contact, but every student will be wearing a mask as they've been. I understand that the kids have been better than the adults at large in the community about mask wearing in school. I hear from my own kids that it's universally accepted. The kids wear them all the time. The kids will be behind desks of polycarbonate. There is simply no reason to keep the kids out. Again, I respect the teachers of this district greatly. I'm close personal friends with several of them. Many of them want to be back and want the kids back. But quite frankly, the teachers do not get to dictate. They're one voice, but the parents are a voice, the administration is a voice, and the members of the community are voices. And by and large, those voices want the kids back in school. During the pandemic, we've seen how many, many, many essential workers responded. Nurses worked full-time, double shifts at hospitals without PPE early in the process. They exposed themselves. Doctors didn't say, I don't feel comfortable coming into a hospital. Cashiers at grocery stores making $7.50 an hour didn't say, I can't be here because I'm at risk. People came to work because their functions are essential. Teachers are more essential than any of those workers because they guide our most vulnerable population, which is our children. We need the kids back in school. The other points I want to address very briefly from what I just heard are about cooperation and how the teachers' voices were not taken into account on the most recent task force. Well, I sat on a task force 2 task forces ago, and the teachers' voices overwhelmingly controlled that discussion. Again, the concerns are reasonable. The parent voices were drowned out. The parents wanted the kids back months and months and months ago, and the strongest opposition to that was the teachers' union. Again, not the individual teachers, but the teachers' union. I respect that some of the teachers feel unsafe, some have medical conditions, and for those conditions, those people are teaching remotely, but the time has come to get the kids back in school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn.
Good evening. My name is Charles Morelli. I have a son who is a senior in the school, and I'm also speaking as a teacher. It's very important for me to just put forth my idea of what I've heard tonight and how important it is to get the kids back in school. It's essential that they come back. I'm sure you've all heard the data. You read the reports. I'm not going to give you all detailed information. As a teacher, what I see, and I've been teaching since the early 90s at a school just down the block, these kids are suffering. This is a crisis. They have to be back in school. To learn remotely, I think we're fooling ourselves. They're not learning the way they need to in class. They have to be with the teacher. It's essential for their well-being. These kids are depressed. They're sitting home. They're not seeing any purpose. Our kids who are going off to college are not learning what they need to get to the next level. And I do think that it's taken too long to get them back. I think planning could have really been jump-started a bit sooner. I'm a little concerned that the plexiglass is not even completely ordered. I mean, this has been since March, we've been in the pandemic. I would have thought that maybe this could have been kick-started a little sooner. Please don't get me wrong, I have total respect for the teachers. I'm so grateful for everything they've gone through. Their safety is paramount. We're all worried. There's good news. The vaccine is here. Most of the teachers I work with have jumped on the vaccine. I just came back a few hours ago from my second one. So I'm comfortable. I really am worried that these kids are in a crisis. They got to get back to school. And that's really what it comes down to for their well-being. I'm just worried what I see. And I think the teachers are doing a great job. I applaud them. I applaud the administration. I'm concerned about their well-being. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maeve Mooney, and I'm a senior at the high school. I just want to thank all of you for all of your hard work, getting us back to school and letting us do activities like class night and sports. And I truly agree with everything mentioned about the students being depressed. It's really taking a toll on all of us. And as of right now, coming to school really breaks all of our hearts. So as long as we keep going and get back, I really think everything will be much happier within the high school. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to take a second to applaud Maeve and the work she's done with SGA and the bravery she had exhibited rapping on social media. I don't know if I could have done it, and excellent work, bravo.
Thank you. Moving on, we have two sympathy resolutions this evening. Rudolph Master Ioni, whereas the members of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District have learned with sorrow of the recent passing of Rudolph Master Ioni, former custodian of the Lynbrook School District, and whereas Mr. Master Ioni served the Lynbrook School District for 30 years, from 1976 through 2006, first as a cleaner, then as a custodian. And whereas the Board of Education is mindful of the contributions made to our district by Mr. Master Ioni during his years of service to our community. Be it resolved that the Board of Education records its sorrow, its sympathy, and the esteem in which Mr. Mastrioni was held. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Mr. Rudolph Mastrioni with the hope that they will find solace and comfort in the rich heritage of good works for which he is remembered and revered. Dr. Mary Hodnett, whereas the members of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District have learned with sorrow of the recent passing of Dr. Mary Hodnett, former teacher in the Lynbrook School District, and whereas Dr. Hodnett served as a social studies teacher for 34 years, from 1958 through 1992 at Lynbrook High School, and also served as department head in the social studies department, and whereas the Board of Education is mindful of the contributions made to our district by Dr. Hodnett during her years of service to our community. Be it resolved that the Board of Education records its sorrow, its sympathy, and the esteem in which Dr. Hodnett was held. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Dr. Mary Hodnett with the hope that they will find solace and comfort in the rich heritage of good works for which she is remembered and revered. Moving on to Superintendent's recommendations, I'd like to ask for a consent agenda on resolutions 2102C1 through 2102C21. 2102NC1 through 2102NC3, 2102NC5 through 2102NC8, and 2102G1 through 2102G34. May I have a motion, please? Mrs. Hanson, second, Mrs. Marcus. All in favor? May I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mr. Paskoff, second, Mrs. Danino. All in favor? I'd like to ask the motion to adjourn to go into executive session to discuss matters of personnel. Mrs. Hanson, second, Mr. Pileski. Thank you. Good night. Stay safe.